Okay, there's 5 of us, so we've got a quorum. Remind members again that they need to switch off mobile phones as they interfere with the sound recording system. Declare any relevant financial or other interests in relation to today's business, and please switch off the volume on your tablet devices. Function and F8. Peter, as you will have noticed, is not with us. He is unwell and has been off this week. We hope that he makes a full recovery and back next week. He's on antibiotics apparently. And on behalf of the committee, can I express our thanks to Paul Carlyle for stepping in at short notice to assist with today's meeting.
Chair, I think we should say that we do. Peter, just wishing him well.
He's in a bad way apparently.
He wasn't in good shape in London today, so.
No, I
Hope he enjoys his free prescriptions.
Well, he has them.
Well, he has them, yeah. Are there? Well, we've got 2 other apologies then, one from Athol and one from Davy Hilditch. We have the draft minutes of the meeting on the 5th of March at page 5, and could I have members' agreement that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting?
Agreed.
There's a decal update issue on Casement Park and a memo at page 10 and a briefing paper at page 12. The committee will recall that following the update on the 29th of January 2015, members asked for specific information on 2 areas. Those were the costs associated with the recent judicial review and a confirmation of the final seating number at Casement Park. It was anticipated that information would be available by the end of February. Unfortunately, the technical report that the Decal Casement Park Programme Manager was waiting on has not yet been finalised, and therefore the information is not available. Officials agreed to attend the committee. The purpose of the briefing, however, was to receive the information that the committee had requested. Therefore, the briefing will be rescheduled in April when the information becomes available, and there was an email about that on Monday. So a written briefing paper providing a general update is in the members' packs for noting. Are you content to note at this stage?
Agreed.
Which brings us on then to item 4 on the agenda, in the Ulster Scots Agency briefing on the savings delivery plan. And if I could refer members to the memo at page 16, the Ulster Scots Agency's briefing paper at page 18, the Ulster Scots Saving Delivery Plans for 2015-16 at page 24, and the corporate plans are available at page 26. Further on, but separate at page 35 of the table papers, members can find correspondence between William Humphrey and the Ulster Scots Agency regarding the LIFA equivalent. So,
Yeah.
I'll have the folks in now. Changing it? No, no. Okay. And could I welcome to the meeting Mr. Ian Crozier, who's the Chief Executive of the Ulster Scots Agency, and David McCallum, who's the Director of Corporate Services. Welcome to the meeting, and if you want to proceed with your presentation to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm aware that members have interest in a number of areas that they want to discuss with us. Obviously, so I'll aim to keep it relatively brief in terms of the introduction. Forward on a short briefing paper there for the attention of members of the committee. Sets out a number of key things in terms of the agency. First of all, the corporate framework within which we are delivering in terms of the key values that inform our work, in terms of the strategic aims that the agency is working towards at the moment, and also in terms of some of the key achievements from last year and some of the key priorities for this year. The reason I put in some of the corporate material in terms of the guiding principles and so on is that I'm conscious the committee hasn't actually had an opportunity to discuss any of that with us up to this point. And the key guiding principles that are there are informed by discussion with the Ulster Scots sector, our own knowledge obviously of agency priorities, departmental priorities, and also then assessment of risk that has been identified through our own corporate governance processes. And for that reason you can see things like authenticity and quality in terms particularly of the published work, but in general in terms of all of the work of the agency. We aim to ensure that at all times we present Ulster Scots in the best possible light, and you'll be aware that there have been issues around that, Chair, in the past. In terms of capacity building, the need to expand the Ulster Scots community sector and to ensure that whenever we're doing work that we are leaving a legacy of enhanced capacity within the community. Partnership and mainstreaming, very much driven by the resource environment in which we find ourselves, in the sense that with less money around, you're looking at all times for opportunities to get other agencies and organisations to come in to work with us, to commit resource to our priorities, and to get government bodies who have statutory responsibility for areas which are very relevant to Ulster Scots, and in many cases those statutory responsibilities are not currently being addressed by anybody other than the Ulster Scots Agency. There is a need to influence the mainstream delivery by other organisations like the Department of Education to make sure that people who do have a responsibility for Ulster Scots, for telling the Ulster Scots story, and in some cases those are legal responsibilities, that those responsibilities are lived up to. In terms of equality of opportunity, obviously we have an obligation under Section 75. In terms of poverty and social inclusion, those are very high on the departmental agenda, and indeed the Northern Ireland Executive's agenda. So where there are opportunities for us to engage in terms of Ulster Scots in disadvantaged communities, then we will seek to do that, and particularly where we have grant programmes, we will proactively seek to ensure that those grant programmes reach some of the most disadvantaged communities. And also in terms of social inclusion, it's worth noting, of course, that the Ulster Scots community is predominantly something which impacts in rural communities, where there are different issues, or the kind of issues that face communities are different from what they are in a more disadvantaged urban setting. And also then to reflect the reality of the communities and areas that we operate in. We have a north-south remit, but also importantly we have an east-west remit, and that's something that over the last few years we've been seeking to build on. Now, in terms then of the key priorities that we have in the current corporate plan period, the current corporate plan runs from 2014 to and within that we have priorities which are to inspire, to educate, to empower and to improve. And in terms of inspiring, we're talking about the identification, interpretation and animation of Ulster Scots heritage, language and culture. One of the key issues that you'll be aware of is that many people have not, particularly around Ulster Scots language, but also across the piece, that people know that there are stories, but they don't know that the stories are Ulster Scots. So a lot of people, for example, will know about Bushmills Distillery, and they maybe have been to visit Bushmills Distillery, but they won't understand that there's an Ulster Scots backstory that goes along with that. So one of the things that we're looking to do through a number of initiatives is to start to populate that backstory and to raise awareness, because actually you don't need to start in the short term building museums. And there's a lot of stuff out there which is focused at tourists or which is focused at education, where there's an Ulster Scots richness and story that can be told before you start kind of building new stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there to identify and badge and interpret for people. In terms of education, our agenda is to work to and note that it's we will work to ensure, because it's not our responsibility, but we will work to ensure and do our best to ensure that Ulster Scots penetrates the education system in both jurisdictions, obviously particularly in Northern Ireland because that's where the balance of our work occurs, but to make sure that where we can find opportunities to penetrate the education system, that we do that to create demand for engagement with Ulster Scots in schools, and I'll come on to that in terms of some of the key achievements last year. Empowerment is really around making sure that communities, that individuals within communities and community organisations have the skills that they need, have the capacity that they need to engage with Ulster Scots and support the development of it. And then finally, in terms of improvement, it's really a commitment to continuously improve around the governance and the finance and so on within the organisation. In terms then of some of the key highlights, and I would emphasise that this is the, these are very much the potted highlights of 2014. Big issue on the corporate side for us. We relocated the headquarters of the agency at the start of last year. That garnered a saving for us of around 70,000 a year, and it's worth noting, as we come on perhaps to some of the financial matters later on, that we have two sets of premises, one set in Belfast, the other set in Raphoe, County Donegal. We relocated the premises in Raphoe, County Donegal, cut that accommodation cost in half. And we relocated, obviously much smaller positions, so in cash terms you're talking about a much smaller amount of money, and then relocated the office in Belfast and saved 70,000 a year through doing that. We installed at the Thompson Dry Dock, which is obviously the site where the Titanic was built, a public art installation reflecting Ulster Scots inventiveness and innovation, which will be then seen by circa 80,000 visitors a year who come to that site. We're following that up this year with a publication on inventors and a touring exhibition, and obviously that's very relevant to the STEM agenda within the education system as well. So again, opportunities for further work and development. In July of last year, we launched two heritage trails in Belfast in conjunction with the Belfast Civic Trust, one on architectural heritage in the city and the other on Christian heritage in the city. And I'm pleased to say that anecdotally anyway, from the people in Visit Belfast, which is obviously the main TIC, not only in the city but Northern Ireland, those are the two fastest moving pieces of literature in the centre. And we've done a number of reprints since that was launched last July because the demand for it is very, very high. Obviously, part and parcel of the relocation was the development of the Discover Ulster Scots Centre, and with support from DCAL we were able to work, both ourselves, the MAGAS, the Ulster Scots Community Network, to put together the Discover Ulster Scots Centre, which was then opened in November of last year, soft opened, and as we come in then to a new tourism season, having ironed out a lot of the wrinkles around the service provision, we will then ratchet up the marketing in connection with that. In terms of the east-west stuff, two primary school twinnings established last year. One of those will involve Craiga Primary School in Belfast with a primary school in Irvine in Scotland, and that was on a theme of shipbuilding, Irvine being the site of the Scottish Maritime Museum, and we worked in conjunction with the Maritime Museum to do that. And also then Glen Primary School down next Larne was twinned with a school in Dumfries, and the theme there was around a Burns-related language theme. And actually I was very pleased to be able to go along when the kids from Glen went over. The two schools met up at the Burns Birthplace Museum, and both sets of children then were involved in reciting Burns, reciting some Ulster Scots poetry as well, and reciting some poetry that they had written themselves. So it was really good to see the level of interest that there was there, and we're aiming to do 3 school twinnings this year. Really, it's a programme where there is an immense level of interest. You could spend a lot of money on establishing east-west twinnings because there is such a level of interest, but of course it's restricted by the resourcing. We have a flagship school programme which was launched a couple of years ago. We have 22 schools currently working through that. We have a waiting list as well of similar scale. Schools come on, they do a 10-week starter programme, which is an intensive activity around a whole range of Ulster Scots kind of art forms, language and so on. And then the schools get to identify 4 themes that they will work on then for the balance of an 18-month period. And then at the end of that, then, subject to satisfactory progress, they're awarded Ulster Scots flagship school status. We delivered touring dramas in 30 primary schools around Ulster. We delivered after-school clubs in 30 schools around Ulster. Again, there's a level of interest which is growing within the border counties, but growing from a small base. And you do face other issues working with schools in the border counties, because the schools you're operating in are very much smaller in scale than people here would be used to in Northern Ireland. The schools are very small, and that can have issues in terms of what you're able to roll out to them because of the size of the class groups and so on. But it's an area that's growing for us, and we're deliberately growing it all the time. We supported last year 19 music and dance tuition projects in schools. The agency for a number of years had a peripatetic music scheme where we had a number of tutors that we put into schools. We ran into a number of technical issues around that, which resulted in us having to discontinue the scheme. And the alternative which we've now developed is to do grants directly into schools. Now again, music and dance tuition in schools is core responsibility of other people, but the Ulster Scots Agency invests a lot of money in the provision of activity in schools towards that objective of increasing the level of demand, increasing the level of interest, in the hope that in due course we will persuade those who actually have the statutory authority for doing it to do it. We changed, as a result of evaluation last year, our delivery mechanism around localised community capacity building. We used to have a scheme called a community worker scheme, where we funded up to 10 part-time posts in community groups around the province. Following evaluation, we felt that that scheme wasn't really hitting the mark, and we developed a new scheme where we support 3 full-time community development posts in projects around the province, 1 in South Down, 1 in West Tyrone, 1 in North Belfast. And those projects are all coming to the end of their first year. The evaluation that has been undertaken in respect of that activity is that the results are very good, that there's a really good level of engagement with schools, with community groups and so on. And there's recommendations coming forward then to the agency's grant subcommittee shortly to extend those projects for a further year. Obviously it would be good to have more projects like that, but at the present time resources simply don't allow. We then also have an extensive programme of community directed grant funding, so 106 grants out to local communities to provide music and dance tuition in their areas, support for 21 Ulster Scots summer schools, and the geographical, over the last couple of years we've been able to ensure a much better geographical spread. Traditionally the summer schools were very much focused on the west of the province, but last year there were 6 or 7 summer schools in. Out of that, 21 were actually east of the band for the first time, and 2 in Belfast. So previously, 3-4 years ago, you wouldn't have had any summer schools in Belfast. So, and part of that is built on the work of the Impact programme and expanding that, expanding the level of uptake on some of our other grant programmes as well. And also then we've funded 9 Ulster Scots community festivals around the province. The picture with community festivals has tended to be the reverse of the summer schools, where the summer schools were centred west of the Ban, the festivals were centred east of the Ban. But what we're trying to do this year as well is to proactively go out to work with communities and talk to people and say to them, look, we would really like you to start engaging with these festivals, see what you can do to build up activities in the local area. And certainly the anecdotal position is that we will get a number of applications in from west of the Ban this time. So you're looking to spread it, but the reality is that you're spreading it thin in terms of what's there. The level of support for festivals the number of festivals is probably half what it was 5 years ago. The number of M&D tuition projects is half what it was 3 years ago. But nevertheless, a strong slate there, I think, of delivery against the agency's strategic priorities. And as I say, that's very much the highlights of what is there. In terms of planned activity for this year, within the next 4 to 5 weeks, we'll be launching a new Discover Ulster Scots web portal. And the idea of the web portal very much modelled on Discover Ireland, Discover Northern Ireland.com, in terms of focused on visitors, tourists. Doesn't matter whether tourists are from other countries or whether they're just from other parts of Northern Ireland, but getting visitor-focused attractions on board, getting them identified as Ulster Scots, getting them badged as Ulster Scots. So when we launch that scheme, for example, you will have visitor attractions like St Anne's Cathedral, the Linen Hall Library, the Bushmills Distillery, Carrick Castle, places with big visitor numbers where the Ulster Scots story previously wasn't being identified, wasn't being told. Obviously, we're going to people and offering a free marketing platform to them, so that works. It works for them, works for us. But we're due to launch that shortly. We're also working to launch, and be launched certainly before the end of June, if not indeed before, our new Ulster Scots Heartland scheme. And the Heartland is a geographic designation of areas where there is a rich Ulster Scots language, heritage and culture. We will be inviting local councils to submit bids to set up steering groups within their local communities and submit bids to us seeking support to be recognised as an Ulster Scots Heartland area. There will be financial support available from the agency of £25,000 over a 12-month period, and we will expect the council to match that in cash with £25,000 of their own. Initially, our intention had been that the support would be at a level of £50,000, but actually feedback from local councils indicated that just where budgets are at the moment and where RPA and so on is, that it would be easier to go in at a lower level and perhaps build it up. But certainly the case that there are areas where, if you imagine the old Venn diagram, where the circle of language, the circle of heritage and the circle of culture overlap very strongly. And you could be talking about North Down and Ards, you could be talking about Mid and East Antrim, even talking about the Kingdom of Mourne down in South Down. There are areas there where there is a richness, and actually helping to emphasise that richness and to develop a sense of place is very much what the Heartland scheme is about. Before the end of May, in fact, hopefully much more before the end of May, we'll be launching our new Bruce 700 Heritage Trail. We have a series of activities this year which are marking the 700th anniversary of the arrival of the Bruces in Ireland in 1315. So I'll not get into I'll not get my anorak on and start telling you the whole story of that. But the key point is that there are relevant heritage sites which are going to be marked, which stretch from Greencastle, County Donegal, right down to Greencastle, County Down, and through into Falkirk and County Louth. So there will be a north-south heritage trail around the Bruce 700 story. There will be a number of drama projects in local schools. 2 of the twinning projects that we're doing this year are on that Bruce theme. A twinning between a primary school in Carrickfergus, County Antrim, and a primary school at Maybole, which is in the historic borough of Carrick, in Ayrshire, and also then Larne and Inver Primary School will be twinned with a primary school in Ayr itself, where the significance of those two stories being Edward Bruce came over 1315, crowned King of Ireland in Carrickfergus in the June of that year. He was the Lord, he was the hereditary Lord of Carrick in Scotland, so that you're emphasising that connection, and also the journey of the Bruce army went from Ayr to Larne, so that's the rationale for why you twin schools there, because there's a relevant local story to tell for the kids, and there's a good strong level of cross-border interest in that project as well. We're doing an interpretive project with Larne Borough Council at the new Gobbins Centre. We're working on that at the moment. We will be establishing a maritime heritage trail in Belfast. We worked with the Magus to secure some additional resource from the department in relation to that. That will involve maritime heritage signage going into the area, basically where the Belfast shipbuilding story started. At Ritchie's Dock there, just behind the Harbour Office, stretching right round from Ritchie's Dock all the way round to the Thompson Dry Dock on the County Down side, with spurs then going off into local communities in North Belfast and East Belfast. Very relevant, of course, because the tall ships are coming in July. We're looking at a scenario where you'll have potentially 500,000 visitors over a 3 or 4 day period. So it's very important that the supporting narrative is in place, because you shouldn't be in a position where you can have a maritime festival in Belfast, you can have the tall ships in Belfast, and the people in Belfast don't know the name of William Ritchie, who is the guy who gave us the whole thing in the first place. Only for an Ulster Scot coming over, there wouldn't have been a shipbuilding industry, and the Harlan and Wolffs of this world are all built on the shoulders of Ritchie and the people who came after him. So we're going to make sure that the heritage signage is in place to do that. We're working to create, there will be a trail map as well, and we're working with Belfast City Council to make sure that there is a presence at the Tall Ships event. We're actually talking to the Maritime Museum in Scotland about getting a team to come over from there. So you will have Scots at the Ritchie Dock building wooden boats, demonstrating the skill set that Ritchie and his people brought across. So the plan is to bring them across to have a very interactive experience for people. And in addition to that, obviously, cultural showcasing and so on will go on. If with a following wind, as it were, to keep the maritime theme going, we can pull it together. There may well be a world record attempt on the world's biggest Scottish dance. And if we can get as many people doing the sailor's hornpipe as we possibly can down at the dockside in Belfast, then
volunteers are invited.
It's something that we're very keen to do. The other big trail project from a tourism point of view, Chair, is an Ulster Scots presidential trail. Working with Tourism Ireland as we do, one of the things that we've identified with them is there's a big gap. There's a huge story connecting Ulster Scots to Scotch Irish and in turn then to presidents of the USA. There's nowhere else in the world that has a heritage like the heritage that there is here. There are a number of key sites around the province, actually both on the County Antrim side and also over in County Tyrone, County Londonderry, where you've got presidential homesteads and you've got other key sites. People like Andrew Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant, Woodrow Wilson, Chester Alan Arthur and so on. There is a big story there. There are people who are household names in America but virtually unknown names in Ulster. So our plan is to develop a presidential trail. We work with the local councils, obviously, but also there is strong interest from a Tourism Ireland perspective that if we pull together the narrative here, if we up the game here in terms, because actually there are a number of places which could be, the operation of them could be extended, and the tourism prominence could be extended. I think it would be fair to say that if we can do that, then Tourism Ireland are very keen to make the direct connection, so that where, for example, you have an Andrew Jackson Centre in Carrick, they will make the connection to the Hermitage, his home place in Tennessee, and look to ensure that there's marketing material that goes in there that is reflective of the Ulster story. In an effort, and it's not really in an effort to get people to come from Tennessee, one Ireland, to go to Carrick just to see the Andrew Jackson Centre. The point is that when people have made the decision to come, when they've already made it to Ireland, in most cases they've made it to Dublin, then you're trying to influence people to come north, and for the most part they're heading up to the Walled City on a coach, or they're heading up to the Giant's Causeway on a coach. What you're then trying to do is influence them to take out of that trip to the Giant's Causeway one night in and around Carrick, on the way up to Londonderry, one night in and around County Tyrone, looking at those things. So it's not the big ask of, you're not trying to pull them from America with this, you're just trying to pull them off their bus route from Dublin with this. So essentially, Chair, those are the key activities planned for this year. Any questions that members have, more than happy to try and address them. And say, I know there are other issues that members want to talk about.
Thank you for the presentation. And the first question from William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for your presentation, gentlemen. Obviously, the passion is very clear. I did have the opportunity before Christmas to visit the Discover Ulster Scots Centre, and it's very impressive, and congratulations to you on that. I should also declare an interest as a former board member of the Ulster Scots Agency. In relation to going forward, obviously you're facing, as all arm's length bodies are, difficult times in terms of budgetary cuts. And I've been asking some questions recently from the Minister in terms of funding for Ulster Scots, given the funding that the equivalence goes from Ulster Scots to Ulster Scots and the Irish language, both from the Northern Ireland Government and the Irish Republic's Government. But I wrote to you recently in relation to, and we'll come to that later in terms of the content of the letter and the table of papers, but in relation to the budgetary pressures, Mr. Crozier, in terms of the LIFA, I asked in April of last year in the House the Minister to consider a LIFA equivalent for Ulster Scots. I raised it recently in February again in the House, and you will see the reply in the letter I sent to you. The Minister said that she has attempted on a number of occasions to have meetings with the Ulster Scots Agency to get this moving. What's your perspective on that?
I think, Chair, that obviously Mr. Humphrey had written to the agency. I've subsequently written back to him. I think perhaps that's tabled today. Obviously, the indication was that there had been meetings with the agency. Having gone back, both from my own recollection and having gone back over diaries and so on, there is no record within the agency of any meetings, and I've obviously written back to Mr. Humphrey to indicate that there weren't any meetings with the Minister to discuss that. I have indicated, though, there was a meeting with officials back in 2011 where they asked whether we had anything which was equivalent to LIFA, and we told them that we didn't. They asked, was there anything that the Minister could support? And at that stage we indicated that we were working on the flagship schools thing. The Minister did then come in and support the flagship schools programme. She launched the programme for us at a conference down in Titanic Belfast. But I think Mr. Humphrey's point around the equivalence of LIFA is as much to do with resourcing as it is to do with the practical language acquisition side. And I mean, certainly in terms of any discussions that we had with officials back in 2011, there was no indication of resourcing at that stage. Our view is there was no expectation on their part that they'd asked the agency or told the agency to do anything like that, because obviously there was no follow-up between 2011 effectively, there's no follow-up between 211 and now to say, where is this thing? Obviously, the Minister then did instruct, back in the spring of last year, the Magus to establish a working group to develop an alternative, well, not an alternative, that's not right, but a programme equivalent to broadly equivalent to LIFA. There was a group set up then in the spring of last year. The agency has been involved with that, and there's work ongoing in terms of consultants were brought in to work on the development of an initiative. We're awaiting the report from the consultants, and my understanding is that at the same time colleagues in the Magus are working on a business case, because the commitment to the Minister, as I understand it, is that a business case will be submitted for the Minister's consideration by the end of March.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
In relation to the funding then, your total funding for 2014 was £1,797. Sorry, £1,797,000. You would be concerned if it was the former figure. In terms of the from government here and the government in the Republic, the equivalent then in terms of the money going to the Irish, to your equivalent, Force na Gaeilge, is £3,212,000. So even of which, if I'm right, 75% of your money comes from a Northern Ireland taxpayer, and 25% of Force na Gaeilge's money comes to Northern Ireland taxpayer. So even in terms of the money coming from the Northern Ireland Exchequer, there is a huge disparity before we get the money that's coming from the Republic. Now, I have to say, Chair, going back to Mr. Crozier's answer, and I'll come back to the Minister and the issues surrounding the question and her letter in response to my letter and so on later. But in relation to, I am a bit concerned because on top of the money that's going into Irish, everybody is absolutely entitled to their culture. I want fairness and equity around these issues. As well as the money that's going directly from DCAL into Force na Gaeilge and from the Irish Government, there is then this figure of £625,000, which Mr. Scott revealed to this committee a number of weeks ago, an extra resource. Now, what I want to ask Mr. Crozier is this. Mr. Scott told us there was £625,000 that's gone to LIFA directly from DCAL. There are two staff in DCAL who are working on LIFA. So when Force na Gaeilge, Mr. McNally told us, was approached about developing LIFA, he couldn't, out of his 50-odd staff, couldn't provide one member of staff to do it. So the department decided that they would do it in-house. That's delivered, as I said, £625,000, two extra staff. Why do you think the government then, instead of coming to the agency, and I pushed them about an equivalent, and you're right, equivalence in terms of finance and resource, in terms of people, why do you think the government went to, perhaps it's not fair to ask you why, but is it not indicative of some sort of political involvement that the department then goes and asks the Ministerial Advisory Group?
I think when you just at one point there, it's difficult to ask.
I know, I appreciate that.
So
yes,
sort of comment
that,
on it's political.
But I think, Chair, to put on the record, so I think if funding is going directly into the LIFA project within the department, if they were serious, if the department was serious and the Minister was serious about an equivalent, the money should have been going to the agency, or the agency should have been offered the money, as far as the Gaeilge were offered the money and the resource and turned it down, and it's now being delivered through the department directly.
I think we're into the realm there of something that may be inappropriate for the agency.
I'll leave it there at this stage.
But it would have meant, if the money had simply gone to the agency, that you could have spent the money from day one rather than having to wait a year to get something worked up, because from the range of projects that are underway, they could be enhanced considerably if there was more money available. Okay. Next question, Gordon Dunn.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much, gentlemen, for coming in today. I think we would like to commend you for the work that you're doing. It's, certainly you have enlightened a number of us that are fairly new to the committee about the excellent work you're doing, and we appreciate what you are doing. Your enthusiasm and drive and determination has certainly come through, as William has previously mentioned. And I'd like to put on record with thanks in relation to some work you done in Northtown in Hollywood, in the support there for the publication of a leaflet on the Ulster Scots history of Hollywood. So well done, and thanks for your support. In relation to tourism, Tourism Northern Ireland obviously have a key role in the promotion of tourism. How do you engage with the new badged Tourism Northern Ireland organisation in doing that?
I think, Chair, that our first engagement with the newly badged Tourism NI was to land an application for money on their table.
Not a bad start.
We have an application with them under consideration at the moment for a large-scale public event in Carrickfergus at the end of May. So I know that's being assessed at the moment, and we're hopeful. Can't say anything more than that. You can't be anything more than that. But I think that our portfolio of work around tourism has grown over the last number of years. We have sought to engage both with Tourism NI and also with Tourism Ireland. Obviously, and I suppose in some respects it's easier to engage with Tourism Ireland because they're similar, cross-border body and so on. There are relationships there. There's been a fair bit of turnover in NITB, as was, around staffing and so on. There are certainly opportunities for us within the new framework that they have developed around experiential tourism, around the key themes, the living legends and so on that they have developed. And obviously we see Ulster Scots fitting very much within some of those themes. We see Ulster Scots certainly as a key part of the unique story of Northern Ireland. In terms of making that real, as it were, I think that there is a long way to go. And obviously, you can see that NITB, as were, there are big things. There are big key priorities, things like golf and so on, which are obviously being driven by the fact that there are big events being pitched for and so on, and that drives the agenda to a great extent, which means that whenever you're trying to do things which are, by definition, they're more local than that. I think part of the difficulty is that to get to the position where you're coming on to the Tourism NI agenda, you need to be spending big sums of money. You're talking about really big events, and you're talking about really big signage projects and so on. So we can do something around maritime heritage which complements what other people are doing. It's not going to shape their agenda. You don't have enough money to put into it. And if I could make an observation, I suppose not about NITB, but it relates to that. One of the key themes is around broadly Christian heritage. So one of the big signature projects was this Martyr Trail, for example. Now, when we went in the past to Northern Ireland Environment Agency to discuss, for example, what about interpretation at your plantation castles in County Fermanagh, as an example, where DCAL had funded through the MAG the development of an app to kind of raise awareness of the story of Monet Castle and so on down there. And obviously Fermanagh is a very tourist-friendly place. But what we were told at that stage was it wouldn't be a priority for them to start reworking brandings and livery and so on their castles, unless you were talking about a project on the scale of the St Patrick's Trail, where you're talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. We are talking about projects that are thousands of pounds, because that's what the resource picture is. The agency, for up until relatively recently, wasn't really in a position to bid for money from NITB, because that area of work within the organisation, it hadn't developed to that extent. And it's only now that we're in the position to start bidding for money. And having said that, of course, we were in that position towards the end of last year, and just at the point where you're ready to bid for money, then there's no money. And there's a broader issue with that, in the sense that there's a growing demand for Ulster Scots, whether it be in the education sector, whether it be in the community, whether it be in terms of tourism. More and more people are coming along and saying, can you do this with us? Because they're seeing the kind of things that are being done and saying, well, how can I have that for my area?
Yeah.
As you and colleagues did in Hollywood. And just at the point where that demand starts to go up, the money's going down.
Okay.
Which is an issue. But I mean, certainly we have a commitment to work with Tourism NI, in fairness, mostly around getting money out of their pockets. But that's key for us going forward, because, as I say, the things that we can do on our own are not of a big enough scale to really start turning the tourism agenda.
Just finally, staffing. What staffing you got, Ian?
Our current approved complement, Chair, is 15.77 staff. That's split between 0.77 in our office in County Donegal, and then the balance in the Belfast office. But it's worth noting that obviously of the 14 that are in the Belfast office, you have a number who are corporate, in terms of the Corporate Services Directorate, accountants, office manager and so on. And then you have a grants unit, which is around the administration of the grants. So actually the number of people who work on what you would call the developmental side of things, in terms of making new things to happen, is actually very small. Out of the 15.77, you're really talking about half a dozen people, 6 to 7 people, who are driving all of that new developmental work.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Rosie McCordy.
Gordon Myogly Caherly, thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for your presentation. Can you tell me, how long has Ulster Scots Agency been in existence? When was it first set up?
2000, off the top of my head. Yeah.
And is the development of a dictionary still part of your plan?
The agency is not working on the development of a dictionary at the moment. The agency would have supported at a much earlier stage the development of a publication called the Hamely Tongue, which up until this point has served as the Ulster Scots Dictionary effectively, albeit it is limited in its geographical scope. But obviously, for a number of years, there has been a commitment to the establishment of an Ulster Scots Academy. And the view was taken that the development of lexicography was something which was very much in the remit of the Academy. Obviously then when the department established the Magus, which was working towards the establishment of the Academy, then the Magus set up technical groups to look at things like that. So actually there's another group within the Magus which is looking at those technical aspects, so the agency's not taking forward that at the moment.
So would you know much about that, where that's at, the development of the dictionary? And
no, I'm afraid not, Chair. There is a subgroup, say, within Magus, which is chaired by Dr. Ivan Herbison from Queen's University, and I'm sure obviously colleagues in the Magus would be happy to update the committee on that, but the agency is not represented on that group, so I can't.
Okay, so see, in terms of, and I mean, I have a big interest in language, so that would be my focus, and so part of what you're doing is to achieve authenticity and quality and excellence. So how do you standard proof? What do you measure against? Because that's been one of the things that has been, I think, absent, or something that has been a challenge, that there is no great standard.
In linguistic terms?
Yeah.
I think that, Chair, it is a reality that there isn't an agreed standard around Ulster Scots, but it's also the reality that there isn't an agreed standard around Scots. in Scotland. So, I mean, how that is actually addressed in Scotland is that people recognise that there are different dialects within Scotland, and they accept that variation. So there is a question for Ulster Scots in terms of to what degree do you accept variation within Ulster Scots in Ulster in terms of spellings and so on. Certainly, one of the things that the agency has done, and you know, those are not. Whenever you're dealing with people who are very passionate about language issues, you know, positions become entrenched, and it takes time, and you know, you have to address that over a length of time, and certainly from my discussions with people in obviously colleagues in Forest na Gaeilge, but also talking to people both in Scotland and the Isle of Man, for example. You know, you have similar passionate issues that are there that it takes time to address. I know certainly that the issue around linguistic standardisation is something that the Department of Education over a number of years has held up as an obstacle. However, I think it is the case that while standardisation is probably an obstacle to the teaching of Ulster Scots as a modern language, there's an aspiration for that, not a demand for it, in the sense of the community demanding it to be done. There's an aspiration that it should be done, and we should move towards it. But there are many other things that could be done before standardisation is achieved. And one of the things, obviously, from talking to colleagues in Forest that you're aware of is that the, you know, in terms of Irish, all those things took a very long time to do. Standardisation, development of dictionary. I mean, colleagues in Forest are working at the moment on a dictionary, and it's only the second dictionary in 50 years. So, I mean, and it's a vast, and I mean, I think the cost of that project is something in the order of €13 million. It's a vast project. So, you know, they are very time-consuming, expensive, complicated issues. What the agency has done in terms of trying to move some of these things forward, is number one, to pull together a forum, the Ulster Scots Language Forum, which brings together people from our core funded language groups, from the two universities, the BBC, from the Magus, and from ourselves, to talk about these issues and to start to develop common positions across the language sector. And what we've also done is adopted a model for language development, which is what's called the Fishman model for reversing language shift. So languages which are in danger, there are a number of established ways of doing it. We have adopted the Fishman model, which I'm happy, Chair, to write to the committee about setting out just what that involves. But what we have been pleased with is that when the COMEX, the Committee of Experts, was over, I want to say tail end of 2013, to do their last on-the-spot visit, we explained to them the developments that the agency had put in place over the last year or two, and actually then when the report came out from COMEX last year, the agency was praised for strides that Ulster Scots had made in the most recent reporting period, and actually they indicated their view that what we had done was to set a sound platform for language planning for Ulster Scots based on accepted international practice. So I was very pleased to see that position endorsed. But as I say, in terms of the actual technicality of where we're at with the dictionary and so on, it's a question better for colleagues in the MAG, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no, I'm interested in all that. I'm surprised that there is no agreed standard for Scots. Is that Scots Gaelic, like you're referring to? There's
No Scots?
Scots. Is that different then from Scots Gaelic?
Yes.
Right, okay.
In Scotland, there are two principal minority languages, Scots, of which Ulster Scots is a dialect, and Scots Gaelic. And obviously, Scots Gaelic, Irish Gaelic are closely related, less closely related then to Manx Gaelic, Welsh, Cornish. But those are all in the broad Gaelic family, and you'll be more familiar than I with the difference between P variations and Q variations and all that stuff. But what you have then is that basically, sorry, Chair, for putting my anorak on, that English and Scots are sister languages derived from a common root, which is Middle English. So at a point in time, the two diverge. Scots develops then, obviously at this stage, Scotland is a separate country. So you're talking pre and post Bannockburn kind of period. So you have about 1,000 years of Scotch language history. And Scots develops, it is the court language in Scotland, it is the legal language, it's the language of the people. Obviously then you get to the point where come 1603, you have Union of the Crowns, where James the Sixth of Scotland becomes James the First of England. Then you move towards a single kingdom, in due course a single polity, and then the significance of Scots diminishes. The key point here being that at the time when the bulk of the Scots came from Scotland to Ulster, 1606, 1610, right through that period, Scots is the mainstream language of Scotland, and they bring that language with them to Ulster, and here it remains. So that's, Ulster Scots, people used to get into a very stale debate about, Ulster Scots is like English spoken badly, and it's a dialect of English. It's not a dialect of English at all. It's a dialect of Scots, which is a sister tongue to English.
Okay, I mean that's helpful, but I suppose I don't want it to go off, and that's all very interesting, historical. But what I am trying to, suppose, get at is what's your language development plan? Because a big part of your work is doing language. So what's the progression path? And what is it you do in schools? What do your classes entail of if there's nothing agreed? Just trying to get a sense of how it works.
Ostensibly, Chair, the key linguistic issue in our view around Ulster Scots is that, and there's been DCAL have done research on this through, I want to say that the Omnibus survey, but I can write to the committee with the precise statistics and so on. The issue that has been identified is if you set down a list of words which are Ulster Scots words in front of most people here, and you're talking about 80% of the people will understand the words, they'll know the words. So when you start talking about Fernanst and Forby and Oxters and all of that, people will see those words and they will understand what they mean. The percentage who then know what they are, that they're Ulster Scots, drops down to about 20 to 25%. So there's a big awareness gap in terms of letting people know that actually Ulster Scots is all around them. In fact, I was up and gave a presentation in Mid-Ulster Council about a fortnight ago, talking to the Policy and Resources Committee there, mentioning how Ulster Scots, even in Mid-Ulster, in areas where you would assume that, because obviously the biggest impact of Ulster Scots is in the coastal arc that goes right round, suppose, from south down right to the Lagan Valley and East Donegal. But even in the west of the province, there is a strong penetration of Ulster Scots. In fact, I went into the council office and actually heard somebody using Ulster Scots in the reception as I was going in. But the point is that there's a high level of penetration there, but most people don't know what it is. So there's an awareness raising job. The Fishman model that we have adopted is sequential in the sense that there are 8 steps, and the idea is that you follow the 8 steps in sequence. And what it starts with is recognition of the language in the home. And in fact, that's the dictionary book that I referred to earlier on was called the Hamely Tongue. It's called the Hamely Tongue because that's where Ulster Scots survives as the language of the home and as in social settings.
If you don't mind, if I just break in on you there, I think isn't that sort of the difficulty that we all know these words. They're all sort of familiar words, and it's when do they become just different words or words that maybe aren't in the English dictionary, and when does that become a language? And I think that's what presents the difficulties. How do you teach that? And one of your objectives is the encouragement, the facilitation and encouragement of the use of Ulster Scots in speech and writing in private and public life. So would you be actually seeking, what are you doing to seek that? Is that really what you want to do? You see, I think the whole lines are all blurred here, and that's what the difficulty for most people. They don't see it that.
Could I cut in there? I think it struck me there earlier when the question was asked about, was this Scots Gaelic across in Scotland or another language? And Mr. Crozier explained then that in Scotland you have a 3-language model: English, Scots and Gaelic. Same as Northern Ireland, we have English, Irish and Ulster Scots. So you have 2 minority languages that are recognised in Scotland and here. Many of the issues and I'm conscious of time and just delving very much into one, and I'll make a suggestion in a moment. Many of the issues that are faced by the Ulster Scots movement here would be similar to those faced by the Scots language community in Scotland. And I found one of the most helpful things was a visit to the Edinburgh University, where the Scottish National Dictionary, now the Dictionary of the Scots Language, which is online, if you Google Dictionary of the Scots Language, you'll see there, and it's a piece of work that's still ongoing and growing, but the original publication took something like 20 or 30 years to complete as a dictionary. Runs to 13 huge volumes, the size of several telephone directories, each of them. And it incorporates into that Ulster Scots as a variant, variety, or whatever term you use of Scots, but not to the same degree as the other variants. So there's a huge piece of work to be done here to recover a lot of material. But those issues around how it's used and the variants of spelling, I would just be fearful this morning we could focus. Maybe it is that we organise something separate to have a look at that.
Maybe I'll just bring it to the point, and I'll finish on that. I suppose it's because we've been hearing a lot about LEAFA, and LEAFA's been very successful for the Irish language, and as you may know, LEAFA means fluent, and we've been hearing questions asking for a LEAFA project for Ulster Scots, and it strikes me, how would you go about creating a project which is going to make people LEAFA? I don't know how you say LEAFA in Ulster Scots. I can't see, and it's nearly an impossibility. And the Minister's been asked to bring forward, Chair, a similar project, but she says it's apples and spuds, and I think she's right. You're talking 2 things that are not capable of doing the same thing.
Sorry, could I?
And I just want to hear.
Sure.
I just want to hear what.
It was just to clarify. I think Mr. Humphrey has made the point, and there seems to be some confusion about this. I think to bring some clarity to it, he was not saying that you have here's LEAFA and then Ulster Scots gets exactly an Ulster Scots version of LEAFA. He's simply saying there's investment in the agency and for us as well. On top of that, in addition to that, there's investment in Columkill, there's investment in LEAFA and other things. And he was simply saying, are there projects that could be equivalent in value but appropriate to the Ulster Scots? So it might be that one of the 30 projects that Mr. Crozier mentioned there could be the one that was seen as the best one, the most significant one. Just as LEAFA suits the Irish language community, there could be a different project totally. Mightn't be about fluency in the language, might be about something else. Might be about putting Ulster Scots into schools or whatever. But that there was an equivalent value in investment. I think that's the point that Mr. Humphrey was making.
Okay, so what you're saying is it's just you're looking for like every time there's a pound goes to the Irish, because that's been said, has to get the same equivalent to Ulster Scots. No, that's okay. I'm content actually that it wouldn't be possible to do a LEAFA project for Ulster Scots. Tommy Sastilishin, sure.
Okay, right, thank you. Oliver McMullen.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. You mentioned there there's 106 grants for music and dance. What sort of grants?
You'd be talking, Chair, about an average grant of £1,500 to £2,000 going out to local groups. That will cover cost of venue for tuition, cost of tutors and so on. And you're talking about a balance where of 106 grants, off the top of my head, there are probably 25 to 30 which are, and the balance are around then a range of musical disciplines. About half of the musical resource would go into piping and drumming, Then there would be support going to fiddle, going to fifing and drumming as well, and going to flute and drum. Because obviously you don't, unless it's lambeg drumming, snare drumming's not really something that you do as a kind of solo discipline. It's done in ensemble, so it tends to be that you get things together.
Not include the money for purchasing of instruments, etc.
No.
No.
No. Agency doesn't have any money for purchase of instruments. That's the Arts Council.
You've never got money off the Arts Council for that?
No.
Never?
No.
Okay. You did talk about the talking of history and that there, and I find that fascinating. I could talk to you a lot longer on that there. Do you teach the history of the plantation of Ulster? And the reasons behind it and the up to the present day?
The agency has had projects in the past, and indeed through some of our core funded groups delivers workshops on the plantation. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reasons for it and how it's shaped where we are today.
Yes.
How do you reach out your partnerships, your outreach program? How do you do that? Do you outreach to obviously the Ulster Scots community? How do you reach out to, now there was a letter came in here before the table here a few weeks ago from Ulster Scots, and for the first time I saw it defined as Ulster Scots being Unionist Protestant, and I think it was, I'm not sure now, was defined as nationalist, and that's the first time I've ever saw that.
Okay.
You see,
I think, just Oliver, could you just...
bear me out, Chair.
Sorry, but just maybe an observation, and then I'll let you continue, no problem. I think the letter that you're referring to, it didn't define them as...
Twice or three times in the letter,
No, it was
mentioned the same thing.
It meant you can mention something without it being a definition
Aye, but
and being prescriptive. That was all. Go ahead.
I think if we look at the letter, Chair, it did,
yes.
2 or 3 times in the letter did define those two words.
It may have seen correlations, but it didn't define as such.
Did define it. Your outreach, are we getting out to the nationalist community, for example? Because I listen with great interest there when you talk about Carrick, Glynn, and you mentioned Larne. They're all heartlands of Ulster Scots, you know. As you come down the coast into the glens and that there, nationalist areas there, any outreach there between schools or anything we got there?
I know certainly, Chair, that the Ulland Speakers Association, which is one of our core funded groups, actually undertakes activity in the Glens.
What do they do?
I know that they do workshops in local community groups and schools and so on. They have done workshops even as far as South Armagh,
Yeah.
where people invite them.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's
Yeah.
not it's not a case of going and kind of shoving your culture down the throats of people where it's not necessarily invited. But obviously, when there are invitations now, the agency as well is working with Forest na Gaeilge at the moment on a pilot programme on Ulster Scots and Irish identity into integrated secondary schools. We're part way through that at the minute. One of the community development projects that we fund in North Belfast has actually had good traction already, operating with maintained schools in that area, so much so that actually that a position where one of the schools, because they obviously happen to be in a Shore Road area, one of the schools in the New Lodge they were working with, the VP of that school went then to a school in West Belfast and was so happy with the experience of the work that had been done there that she came straight on the phone and said, look, I'm over at my new school in West Belfast, can we do stuff? So she was straight on the phone, and then the group was saying to them, well, actually, we work with, because that school is on Turn, and Mr. Humphrey and others will be more familiar with the geography there. The school that she had gone to was on the West Belfast side of the Peace Line, just up at Springfield Road, and they were already working with the local with Springfield Primary, and were immediately in a position then to make a connection, say, well, actually, we're working with a controlled school near you. Why don't we try and get you together to do some cross-community and cultural work. So there is stuff there, certainly. We've done our Pat and Plain drama series. Some of those plays were actually delivered in Irish medium schools as well. So where there is interest, we're not going to go pushing it in places where, you know, basically, essentially where it's not wanted, but where it is wanted, you know, we're open to see what we can do to facilitate that, and certainly say there is a commitment around good relations to try and work on that and see what we can do. Obviously, though, there's a resourcing picture where it becomes difficult at times. Obviously, forests have a lot of resource to bring to the table in terms of doing joint working. The agency much less. So it's, you know, that's not without difficulty, and also the fact that forests have a very strong, as you would expect, very strong language emphasis, whereas the agency's emphasis tends to cover language, heritage, and culture, as reflects our statutory remit. Then sometimes you can have a mismatch there in terms of your ability to deliver things effectively to children and young people. But I mean, certainly that, you know, yeah, work does go on within CANR communities where there is an interest.
Okay, that's fine. I'm speaking there as a Board of Governor of a school, not of a school, but there was a school in our own area. It was actually twin with Malvern Street in Belfast at the time. But I've never saw any other twinning coming through, and that's why I've asked the question, you know, on that there, because the Ulster Scots claims to have a lot of heritage within the Midlands, but we never saw any example of it. And it might be food for thought for you, you know, because if you get into the primary schools at an early age and the children listen to both sides of history and culture, it brings a better thing out in the children.
One of the things that maybe do, Chair, if Mr McMullen's interested, the agency some years ago produced a set of DVDs around the McDonald's in Antrim, and actually I think you might find content of interest to you.
Well, we learned how to spin ourselves.
In that, so I mean, if you're,
we learned how to
I mean,
spin ourselves,
I'll forward that to you.
I look forward to that. And the other thing, your Heartland scheme, you've been talking to the council on that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Larne Council.
No, Chair. I mean, essentially, what we've been doing in terms of developing the Heartland scheme, we spoke. It wasn't possible, obviously, in the context of that, to talk to all of the councils who might potentially be interested. But where there were councils where we were already doing a fair bit of heritage work, so for example, Carrick, North Down, Ards, and indeed Donegal, in terms of actually developing the scheme.
Yes.
We took reflection from the local councils, simply in terms of the shape of it. It will then be open to any interested council to submit a bid with the support of the local community in that area, to then obviously to be assessed to achieve the recognition. But we see it very much as a catalyst for development within areas. So there'll be areas. Larne is not one of a number of councils have had support through the Magus to undertake research in their local areas. Carrick is one, Newtonabbey is one, Lisburn is one. North Down and Ards, the agency supported in conjunction with NITB at an earlier stage a piece of research. So it would be fair to say that there will be councils that are further down the road towards this than others, simply because they've had fairly extensive pieces of research done identifying the Ulster Scots heritage in their area. And I say Larne isn't one of those, but obviously there may be opportunities in future for research to be done. I had a meeting last week with the Chief Executive of Mid and East Antrim, and they have indicated anyway that they're going to look at themselves commissioning an update of the research that was done for Newtonabbey and the piece of research to be done in Antrim, So where there, it's not an expensive piece of work. You're probably talking about £5,000 to £10,000, something of the order of that. Would be consistent with the other areas to get it all pulled together. Most of them have worked with the Ulster Historical Foundation to do the research. So if there was an interest in it, and Lauren, and there's a big, there's going to be a big Ulster Scots story in that area. But I think it would be beneficial for the council then to look at having the piece of research done to pull all those stories together.
And the 25,000 you said, there's 25,000 from the agency
Yes.
you give to the council, correct? And then you
Yes.
look for match funding from council.
Yes.
You'd be looking for more from the bigger councils now than 25,000?
Well, obviously, Chair, you're talking about a competitive process.
Aye.
So if one council comes in and says we're going to put 50 down against your 25, and another one says we're going to put 25 down,
Well, with the new councils now, you're Newton Abbey. It's outside, you're talking about Carrick-Lauren, Ballymena, for the Mid and East Antrim one.
you have now a position where you have one council within that council area that has the research done and is sitting with a piece of work that thick. The other two haven't got it done. So there would be a need then, you would expect, for the super council to bring everybody else up to the level that Carrick's at.
Right, okay, and the last question, Chair, and to yourselves. Your budget for the year, I'm looking here at, is 1,856,000, is that right?
No, but I think perhaps you're looking at the decal contribution to the budget. The budget's 2.4.
3.4 million,
Yeah.
sorry. And the contribution from the government, South,
25%, roughly 600,000.
600,000. Are you happy with that?
It's not really for us to be happy or not happy, Chair. I mean, that's the situation as it is there's a 75-25 ratio. That's how the funding is geared. Clearly, we would like more money, as everybody would like more money. I think that before we started going looking for more money, perhaps from the south, that one of the issues might be looking at some of the people who ought to be given money in the north. Because if you look, for example, at the level of resource that we're putting in terms of education and activity in schools, you're talking of something of the order of 200 to 250,000 perhaps a year, when there's nothing coming in from the Department of Education here. So actually getting money from people who should be putting in money
Yes.
here would fill a big hole
Yes.
in the budget before you go looking for, bearing in mind, obviously, in fairness, that our main activity in the south is in 3 counties.
Have you many discussions with the government as far as the budget and what you're doing and your programme in you talk about the three counties?
Well, obviously, Chair, there is a process through which our business plans, corporate plans and so on are approved by 2 sponsor departments, our South Ministerial Council. There is a growing interest. We're very lucky at the current time in the sense that at the NSMC we have 2 sponsored ministers from the south, one being Minister Humphreys, the Minister for Arts, Heritage and Gaeltacht, and the other being Minister McHugh, who is the specific responsibility for the Gaeltacht.
Yes, right.
One of which represents the Cavan Monaghan area and one of which represents East Donegal. So actually then you have 2 ministers, and our main operational area in the south is touching on their 2 constituencies. A very strong level of interest there and backing from ministers for the development of projects in their areas, and indeed Minister Humphreys has come forward with details for us of schools within the Cavan Monaghan area where perhaps we haven't reached, but she's very keen to assist us to reach those, and in fact we're preparing a submission at the moment to the Southern Department indicating the levels of activity in the 3 southern counties, whether that be for schools, community groups, heritage and so on. And it's obviously it's a growing area for us. The agency itself commissioned research for East Donegal, because actually one of the things that had happened with the Magus was that it had supported research being done in for Derry City Council, for Omagh and for Strabane. And really, what you're looking at there is a loop that needed to be closed, and East Donegal was needed to be done to close the loop and look at the heritage in that area. But obviously the Magus didn't have a remit for that. The agency has the remit to work in the south. We commissioned a specific piece of research, and now there's a series of projects falling out of that in East Donegal, and we're looking at a number of opportunities in the south to pick up additional resource, both from within DAG, which is our sponsor, Department of Arts, Heritage and Gaeltacht, and also potentially from DFA as well. So we're exploring opportunities to get greater resource. We have mentioned at a recent meeting with the Department of Education, the Department of Education here has a strong interest in working on a north-south axis, particularly around Irish language issues, and there are a number of projects coming out there. There's equally potential to work on a north-south axis in relation to Ulster Scots heritage projects, because you've got 3 counties there with small schools. Access to resource and getting resource down to them is an issue, and clearly accessibility of cultural education is one of the things that's being looked at in the education strand in NSMC. So there's clearly an opportunity there as well.
Thank you. Just following on from the point that Oliver raised there, he was talking about budgets and so on, and as you rightly say, it's not for you to comment on how departments function and so on, but the issue there was a question asked some time ago about investment across all of the departments in Northern Ireland. I think Mr. Humphrey raised that, and there was a piece of work being done writing out to them. Where is that? Or how far is that on? Sitting
on the corner of my desk physically,
okay.
At the present, Chair. We have had responses back now from all departments. The current position of it, in my view, is that in terms of some departments it's incomplete. Some departments issued nil returns in respect to the request, where clearly there shouldn't have been nil returns issued, because you can see very clearly that there's relevant spend that should have been reported. The other one where there's, I think, a significant under declaration is DE, where the response came back from DE, and I'm painting with a broad brush here, but over a 3-year period, DE was declaring spend of £3 million, which is clearly not right in the context of information that's in the public domain already. And one of the things it's actually an interesting exercise is that if members look at the 2 strategies that were recently launched by DCAL, both strategies major to an extent on education. One of the things that you see, and obviously there's been input from DE has gone in to both documents. What you see in the Ulster Scots strategy is if there is demand, DE will do X. What you see in the Irish strategy is DE is doing X and spending Y. So you've a commitment subject to a demand test to do some things, and in Irish clearly there's an extensive programme. I'm not criticising anybody for the fact that there's an extensive programme. It's a good thing, but one of the things that's also interesting in the Ulster Scots strategy, and the agency very much welcomes the commitment that's been included in the strategy, is around full implementation of cultural rights. UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the International Framework on Minorities, and so on. There's a commitment in there for full implementation of those, which we would see as that's the start of the pathway towards parity of resourcing, parity of respect, parity of representation for the 2 cultures, and it's certainly the case. I mean, you're looking at a position where DE declared roughly £3 million over 3 years for Irish language, heritage and culture, and £750 for Ulster Scots. So
3 years?
Yes.
£750?
Yes.
That's 250 a year.
Can they afford that?
So there was certainly a case, obviously, Chair, where the agency would be keen to bring as complete a picture as possible back to the committee. There may be a case where, and I'm in the hands of the committee here, I mean, what I could do is deliver to the committee the document as far as we have it, the information as far as we have it, and our indication of, we think that there are areas here for the following reasons where there's more.
I think that would be useful if it's seen as a work in progress, effectively.
Yeah.
We get an update and then, that would be good if you could do that. Thank you. Leslie Cree.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the history lesson. It was interesting. Pity you didn't go back to the Cruith Inn, which would predate the flight of the Earls by at least 1,000 years.
You need another 100 million then.
Anyway, in your presentation, you talked about the links between Ulster Scots and the Scots-Irish. What formal links do you actually have with the Eastern Seaboard, bearing in mind how important Scots-Irish is to them?
Chairman, the agency doesn't have any formalised links with the US simply because there isn't the resourcing to do it. We're now in a position where we don't even send people out to America anymore because there isn't the money. And the position from sponsor departments has been that the emphasis must be, as members here will understand, in straitened financial times, the emphasis must be on retrenching what you're doing here. So we don't have a resource package for working in the US. We have to try and work through people like Tourism Ireland because there simply isn't the resource. And we have people coming. There's a strong demand for interaction with the US, with people in the office last week from Milwaukee Irish Fest crying out for, I think indeed Mr McRae has perhaps been to Milwaukee Irish Fest, crying out for people to be over at events in the US. But the reality of it is sending a relatively small number of people to America very quickly runs into a lot of money.
But what about links here? I mean, there are lots of links from Scots-Irish, if you like, to Northern Ireland. Even my own church, we have links with Jackson, Mississippi. I've been in States, go to the States quite often and have lots of contacts, but one of the greater ones, in fact, is the Sister Cities International Group. Have you any links with them?
I'm familiar with the Sister Cities relationships, Chair, through obviously previous involvement with Belfast City Council. I mean, I'll give you a sense of the kind of things that we're doing. I mean, in the last couple of years, one of the big projects that we did aimed at the American market was a joint project with Tourism Ireland on producing a biography of C.S. Lewis, which set out very clearly for the American market, C.S. Lewis's roots here, his Ulster Scots heritage, a lot of the things that he was writing about, because obviously he's a huge figure in America, not actually for the Narnia stuff, but actually for the Christian writing.
That's right.
And obviously in states where that is of huge appeal. In the US, Tourism Ireland were very, very keen to do that with us, and we're happy to work with them on it. Likewise, the presidential trail that is being worked on, there are clear links where you'll be able to connect homestead places in the US with places here. There was work done at an earlier stage in terms of connecting universities here with universities in the US, but I'm afraid to say once the money tap turns off, some of that
It's a
stuff.
pity though that those
quickly.
local authority ones, which are still existing.
Yeah.
Indeed, in my own area, we have links with Sister Cities agreement with Virginia Beach,
Yes.
and they're very much, in fact, come over here quite often, and they're very keen to know and really looking for more and more information about the whole area. It's a pity that
I
can't be exploited better.
I would be very interested actually in, because obviously it's one of the things that some councils have relationships with people. I know Upper Ban, Craigavon Council had a relationship with a city in the US. I did at a stage try to encourage, because we had the Mayor of Lisburn on our board at a stage, to encourage them to look at connection with the big city, the name of which escapes me, where Barber Threads had a huge factory in the US. I want to say perhaps
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Very interesting.
But it would be interesting to
Freeman of New
to
Jersey.
write out, and it's something actually, I mean, I would be happy to do, to write out to the councils and actually ask them what relationships do they have ongoing. I know for a time Larne did as well, which Mr McMullen's maybe aware of, had relationships where they were sending people out to the US as well.
Oliver, no, just in there, I want to labour the point as well, mate.
But there is a point about there's material there that, you know, where we can support and we can work with people. So
But on a more serious note, you did refer to Bushmills
yes.
and the Scottish connection there. I hope you're not going to tell us that the recipe came from Scotland to Bushmills.
Heaven forbid.
Yeah.
Well,
We've gone down many roads today, but we're not going down the road about the history of distilling. We'll hear all night.
Blending it does.
I would just say it's 1608, you'll know that, of course. The first original grant to distill.
Are you declaring an interest, by the way?
I'm quite
probably-
interested, yes.
Right.
probably have to drink a lot more of it to gain an understanding. for that.
Stop that now. Thank you, Mr. Cree. Basil McCrae.
Is there such a thing as an Ulster Scots culture?
Yes.
Would you like to tell me what it is?
Sure, we would say it that
Cover that before we come in.
Ulster Scots, while you be talking about language, culture, heritage, you're talking about the culture and heritage of a people, first and foremost. And you're talking about the culture and heritage of the Lowland Scots who came across the Ulster as part both of the plantation and the private settlements of Antrim and Down. So, you know, the cultural things that those people brought with them, the cultural things that those people engage with, and identifying and bearing in mind that culture is self-identifying. So the things that the Ulster Scots community tell you is the culture of the Ulster Scots people is what we accept.
Also important, I think, just to say the agency has to work within the definition that is in the legislation for the culture.
Well, I'm grateful for your help, Chair, but I only got to the first question. I was going to,
I'm just
to develop a theme down this, just to say, what would happen to the Ulster Scots culture? Could I have to say it undoubtedly and definitively and definitely exists because I'm part of it, so I know it exists. But what would happen if you stopped the emphasis? This is a thoughtful question. What happens if you? What are the practical outworkings if you stop the emphasis on the language aspect of the Ulster Scots culture, which some people challenge, and concentrated more on the cultural bits of the Ulster Scots culture?
I think it's probably two things to bear in mind. That the emphasis on the language is probably not anything like as big as people think it is as a result of the press coverage that it gets. And number two, that if you stop the emphasis on the language, I think you would be actually losing out something significantly in terms of the richness of the culture, because there is, once you do the awareness raising job, there are very few people in this place who don't have Ulster Scots words. And in fact, that's part of the key message of the Minister's LEAFA programme is everybody uses Irish every day. Well, actually, everybody uses Ulster Scots every day and probably to a greater extent. So there is something there which is shared. And as Mr McMullen indicated, I mean, the use of the Ulster Scots language is used as much in the Glens in communities who wouldn't identify as being culturally Ulster Scots, but the language is used.
So, but if I can interrupt you just to say to you, you may not be able to say this because of the position that you're in, and you may have a statute responsibility to defend it. But the Ulster Scots language, in many respects, is takes focus away from the real business of being an Ulster Scot or a Scot-Irish if you happen to be in America. And my understanding was that originally the reason why there was such an emphasis on language was that under the European legislation that to be a cultural identity you had to have a language, albeit a fairly modest language, and that was important to draw down funds from Europe. That was back in 1998, whenever people were setting up things like DCAL and things like that. Do you get any funding from Europe?
No.
See, I just wonder if there's an issue around here. Of course, you have to keep on doing some of it, but I just think that there's two specific questions that I really want to get from you. Do you think that you're just, as an agency, just preaching to the converted? In other words, the people that are really into their Ulster Scots heritage go, it's great that we've got a headquarters and we can do bits and pieces, and people are into history and such like think it's good. But the general population of Northern Ireland, it sort of goes unengaged.
I think probably two observations, Chair. The prominence of the language is something that varies according to where you're from. So I suspect that if you said to somebody in Ballymoney, or you said to somebody in the Ards Peninsula, or you said to somebody in the Lagan Valley in Donegal, is the language less important? They'll say no. You know, people in the areas where the language is strongest will tell you that the language is very important to them. Obviously, the more you've been exposed to kind of metropolitan media and so on, so the closer you are to metropolitan Belfast, the less prominence you will give to the language. But actually, once you get out into rural communities, and one of the things that we talked about earlier on was the social inclusion of rural communities, once you get into those areas, actually the importance of the language goes up in people's estimations.
I just said to you, that I'm a Presbyterian from East Donegal, from Ramelton, in the Lagan, spelt with a double G, so that people can differentiate it from the rest. And I just wonder about how you get an engagement with people like me. I did go to the...
You are a Presbyterian from the Lagan?
Yes.
Okay.
So there you
No
go.
hope for you then, at all.
So there you go. So that's it. And so I can go back and look at these things. But the issue, I said I did go to Milwaukee Irish Fest. And actually, I went there by mistake, to be honest with you.
Turned left instead of right.
I did turn up and went, what am I doing at an Irish Fest? I have to tell you, it's one of the best experiences I had. I met the Ulster Scots agency out there. Maynard owned me and said, what are you boys doing on the hill about this? You should be funding this. Anyway, so that was the message from Maynard in Milwaukee. The point about it is culture turned for me from being an adversarial thing to being a shared thing. And at the risk of upsetting everybody, this is what happened. I was there, not knowing what was going on. I went to the VIP centre. They were liaising with Scotland, I think, at the time. So the opening ceremony was a Scots Highland band in full regalia marching onto the parade ground playing Scotland the Brave, with everybody in the audience waving a tricolour saying, isn't it great to be Irish? And I didn't bother to point it out to them that there was a slight, but that was this fusion that all comes back that they don't see it. So I think there's a positive...
Community relations.
Sorry?
Good community.
Well, you were there in that one, weren't you?
Yeah.
So you can confirm that. So, but it was great, it was fantastic. So I would support... Whenever I try to explain to the Americans about Northern Ireland, I ask them if they've heard of Davy Crockett. Right? Because Davy Crockett in the Alamo, outnumbered, surrounded and asked to surrender, and he gave a fairly typical response, which is why, of course, he was wiped out. But anyway...
Got the flag right.
Well, I just think that we don't get enough of the impact of the Ulster Scots or Scots-Irish identity. There are 26 million people in America that take their lineage from the Ulster Scots side of things, and we don't do enough about it. And I have to say to you, I'm here to be sympathetic, but you are being kept in a cupboard somewhere and not allowed out. You need to make friends, get out and talk to people. But with all due respect to the people that are helping you already, there's no point in preaching to the converted. You've got to get to the other people. And I'm not being critical, I know you've got resources, but people that are not in your mainstream would be prepared to help.
Chair, I'm absolutely sympathetic to everything that Mr. McRae said there. However, I do take you back to the fact that there is an international body whose job it is to promote this place in America, and it's not called the Ulster Scots Agency. And to make the kind of difference, because you're rightly identifying that there is a confusion in the communities, and now it depends where you are. once you're down in the south, people aren't confused between whether they're Scotch Irish or Irish American, but in other states they are. But the difficulty is that to reach simply the pure numbers of people that there are in America, and to address issues of attitudinal change, the amount of resource that you need to do that is mighty, and we haven't got it.
Could I just say, we're coming to 11:45. There's two people trying to get back in. We've got the Irish Amateur Boxing Association outside, who were to be in 15 minutes ago.
Well, can I say, Chair, you have been very generous in terms of your time with other people, and there is just one more point that I want to make. That I want to make. There is an issue about the Milwaukee Irish Fest, which, as you know, is the biggest of the Irish festivals, but there's about another 20 dotted around the place, including Arizona. You sit and think, what is there in Ulster Scots community in Arizona? But there are people there that we need to go and exploit. So what we need to find out a way in this is a paper or some strategy that talks about our cultural identity as a benefit in terms of tourism. I don't know that Tourism Ireland is in the process is really in the cultural identity market. We might have to do it as a separate agency or a separate way of doing it. But you've rightfully highlighted the disparity in funding. I think what you have to highlight is the opportunity that will actually help us all, and to do it in a cohesive and working together point of view. I do not think that culture should be something that separates us. I think we should be celebrating our differences, and I think that the Ulster Scots culture in particular has survived for hundreds of years and will survive. We just need to tell people a wee bit more about it. So I'll finish on that point because the Chair said other people are going to come back into it. But I would like you to have a little bit more ambition.
Could I endorse everything that you've said, Basil? And I think everybody who works in the agency and in the Ulster Scots Community Network and the wider Ulster Scots community, they have the ambition. The difficulty has been that in terms of resources, you can only get so much work out of one person, or out of 10, or whatever the number might be. And the investment to get the sort of work that, and the sort of bang that we want to see across the Atlantic, and the impact, that would require more. And that's where every council that has a sister city relationship should be putting some money on the table. The Northern Ireland Bureau needs to be in there. Tourism Ireland need to be in there. Everybody needs to be in there in a coordinated way. The difficulty also for the agency, and we'll see that when we get the figures, hopefully in this letter. The agency's modest budget is being spent at the moment doing things that really other people should be doing.
Agreed.
So that they are funding work in schools that should really be funded by the Department of Education. They are funding work that in some cases other departments, we'll see those figures in due course. So we get beyond the whatever it was, 250 or 750 quid. There needs to be a change of mindset there, but today has been useful, I think, in bringing a lot of the issues out on the table and addressing some of the misunderstandings or misconceptions that I think some folk didn't maybe appreciate the exact position of the everybody in Belfast of my generation.
Our generation, I suppose.
You're younger, but anyway, just everybody of our generation in Belfast who's not brought up in an Ulster Scots speaking area, if you work with them, because I've done this in community centres across the city, will probably know, depending on their age, if they're older than me, if somebody in their 80s, will probably a generation on beyond mine, will probably know 200 Ulster Scots words. You may not know them as such, but when you ask them what is the word for whatever, and I've done that in community centres in East Belfast, North Belfast and West Belfast, different areas. People know more of it. The language has an impact in a whole range of ways, but not to the same extent, as you rightly point out, as in the core speaking areas in the Ards Peninsula and up around North Antrim and so on. And that mix of language and culture the balance will vary from place to place. But you can never understand a community without understanding its writings. And so much of the writing of the Ulster Scots community was in Ulster Scots. So if you're to understand the writings of James Orr, Huddleston, Porter, Thompson, or any of the Weaver poets, to read that and really understand it properly, that's where the...
But my point would be to you, and I'm only going to say, is that if you looked at frontiersmen in going through Tennessee, you had a musket in one hand and a Bible in the other. And the Bible was the only book that you needed, and you didn't read it. Somebody at the front told you what was in it, but you were adhering to it. Our culture has come back more in terms of narrative and storytelling and doing and individualism. And I just think that that's why the language is important, but not the whole story.
That's a statement everybody I think would agree with, absolutely. Yep. I'm going to... I don't know what the Ulster Scots is for ripping the back out of, but anyway, Rosie, last question.
Thanks, Chair. Just a small question. Can I just ask, would the Ulster Scots Agency support the call for an Irish Language Act?
Chair, it wouldn't be within our... No, it's not within our competence. It's a political judgment best addressed. As you know, there's political disagreement over it, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me as an official comment.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much for the presentation, and you can see the level of interest in that. We're well beyond our time. I think there's a number of things that came out of it that would actually, from a committee viewpoint, we might follow up on in terms of...
Yeah, I wanted to make a proposal. Just.
Oh, right, okay.
Do
we not wait?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much, and then we'll take Mr. Humphrey's proposal. Thank you indeed. They can't get this white people who are interested in languages and say they are. I don't know the difference between Scots and Yes, thank William.
Yeah, very much support the line that Mr. McCready took. I mean, I haven't been to Milwaukee Irish Fest, but I have been to Nashville and to the Axon Homestead and so on. The Northern Ireland Government puts in a significant amount of money into Tourism Ireland, and there really does need to be, because I had a presentation from Tourism Ireland in their New York office, and they were talking about 28 million, whatever the figure is. It is a huge diaspora out there in both the United States and Canada. And I do think that, this place contributed so many things to America, not least presidents, but the Declaration, the printing of the Declaration, the Great Seal, and all of those things. We really should be pushing in an open door. And I think what I would propose is two things. One is, I think we should invite Niall Gibbons from Tourism Ireland here around this issue to see how we take this forward. He was recently in front of the DEL committee, the DEDI committee, to ensure that the joined upness that Basil talked about, which is necessary. Your point as well about councils is absolutely right, because there are a number of councils, Larne, Belfast, Newry, I think, are three that have links to North American cities. Belfast has put a fair amount of resource into the Belfast-Nashville connection and had sort of cooperation in terms of that. I think there's so much more that can be done, and I would like, I'd like pressure put on Tourism Ireland to see what they are doing. I know that we can't stray or interfere in what the DEDI committee is, but there is, the issue about tourism is that there are about 6 or 7 departments at Stormont that all have an input into tourism. So there's a correlation between the cultural thing and the marketing of Northern Ireland internationally, and that is done by Tourism Ireland.
Can I take that point, that we note it today, give it some thought over the coming week, and then look at the best way of handling it, bring something back next week? Thank you. Right, our next... I'm sorry. Sorry, get my... Good. Thank you. That's great. We're now moving on to the Irish Amateur Boxing Association briefing on 6-month review of Operations Manager post, and refer you to the memo at page 57, the Independent Working Group Implementation Plan at page 59, and the report examining boxing in Ulster published in December 2013, which is at page 63. At page 127, under Matters Arising, members will also find a letter regarding the Department's boxing strategy, which refers to the input the IABA has had in developing shared spaces for boxing clubs. We've got with us now Stephen Mills, Fergal Carruth and Sean Canavan. You're welcome to the meeting. And Fergal Carruth is the Chief Executive of the IABA. Sean Canavan is a Vice President. Stephen Mills, and I emphasise the word former because I think he's moved on to something else, but was the Ulster Operations Manager, and he'll tell us about that in due course. So could I thank you for coming this morning, and ask you to, when you get settled in there, just to make your presentation to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Morning. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for inviting my colleagues and I to speak with you today. With me today is Mr. Sean Canavan, Vice President of the Irish Amateur Boxing Association, and IABA's former Ulster Operations Manager, Stephen Mills. At my last visit to the committee, I offered the IABA's initial response to each recommendation made by the Independent Working Group after its review of boxing in Ulster. Following the meeting, the IABA consulted further with our membership and the Independent Working Group to discuss our options moving forward. We also sought strategic guidance from the Department of Arts and Leisure through Sport NI and the Minister, and received support to assist us in the delivery of the recommendations. With this support, the IABA appointed an Operations Manager in October 2014. The role has a very clear remit, and the Operations Manager is responsible for the delivery of the key recommendations alongside overseeing and line management of more general operations, including performance and club development. As a briefing paper, we have provided you with an operations plan which outlines our commitment to achieving the recommendations. Please note there have been a few minor updates to the briefing paper which we forward you. I realise our time is limited and I would like to update you on the progress, but should highlight that timescales are indicative and should be viewed as flexible to allow us to respond to the needs of our sport and reflect the challenges of change. Recommendations. First heading is UK Equality Standard. Technically, this was not a recommendation from the report, but we felt that the equality standard would be the ideal starting point for us in the process of implementing the recommendations. The equality standard has allowed us to review and update our equality-related policies, audit staff and key volunteers within Ulster, and publicly highlight key equality messages we want to promote within Ulster boxing. On the 9th of March 2015, we received confirmation from the UK Equality Standard Assessor that we have achieved foundation level of the UK Equality Standard. For us, the foundation level is a starting point and has given us a direct progress, but we are comforted and motivated by the closing remarks, which included: the documentation provided is generally first class and reflects on the high level of commitment shown by the organisation in embracing the equality standard scheme. The documentation moves on beyond mere compliance to reveal a genuine desire to mainstream this work within Ulster boxing. Review of the governance structures in Ulster. As mentioned, the IABA appointed an operations manager in October 2014. Since then, the operations manager has held a number of meetings with myself as CEO and of the IABA and Sport NI to look at the best way to progress a governance review. We have looked at a number of ways other sports have gone through similar processes and feel that any review and potential restructure must be considered carefully and in line with the recommendations for the development of our sport. Unfortunately, our operations manager recently left his post, and we are currently recruiting a replacement who will continue to develop this element. Disciplinary procedures. A good relations strategy is currently being developed as part of the IABA's Boxing for All programme. The strategy will further highlight the IABA's stance relating to sectarianism and racism. Members will be required to sign up to the Good Relations Strategy, which will highlight ways to deal with incidents, our disciplinary procedures and a range of penalties for offenders. Our Boxing for All programme aims to promote and develop community relations within boxing. Part of the programme includes promoting our values and what we expect from clubs, supporters and event organisers. We have flyers which we'll now give out, if that's okay. Our disciplinary procedures are clearly set out within the IABA's rulebook and will be further enhanced and better promoted through the Boxing for All programme. We currently offer training for those responsible for child protection in our sport, and this covers dealing with incidents. Indeed, in the past 18 months, we have had over 320 volunteers attend our Safeguarding Young People in Boxing workshops. Soon we will be offering additional training for those responsible for discipline and the introduction of penalties directly linked to incidents of sectarian stroke racist intimidation. Policy development. The Boxing for All programme includes the advice and guidance around hosting events. Events for all flyers already handed out. Chill factors will be discussed within the Community Relations Workshop currently being developed, and policy will follow further consultation with community relations experts, clubs and members. Social media advice and guidance has recently been developed within our Safeguarding in Boxing policy and is covered within our Safeguarding Young People in Boxing awareness workshops. But we feel it is also important to develop a specific policy on social media. Selection processes are to be reviewed in advance of major championships. We are currently out to tender for development of, on coaching and volunteer training. We are currently out to tender for development of a bespoke community relations workshop for boxing, which will include the training of staff and volunteers. We have made community engagement and community relations a key requirement for all clubs to achieve the Club Accreditation Scheme for Boxing, IABA Club Mark Scheme. You'll see further handout on Club Mark. Advice and guidance has been developed on event management, which is Events for All, through the Boxing for All programme. This is also considered within Club Mark, and further training around event management will be developed when any new procedures are agreed linked to discipline. Neutral venues. We continue to encourage the use of safe and neutral venues and have engaged with Sport NI through their facilities strategy to demonstrate the need for more accessible neutral venues for boxing. We look forward to submitting a funding application to their upcoming scheme that, if successful, would result in a fit-for-purpose facility for boxing in a neutral and safe venue. In preparation for this, we have held a number of meetings with potential partners, and neutrality will be to the forefront of our minds in moving forward. We'd also like to note that we have recently developed a high-performance centre in Ulster, based in the University of Ulster at Jordanstown. This site was selected with neutrality in mind and will be key in the development of our most talented athletes. Belfast Good Friday Agreement. There is a clear willingness within the IABA to support the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and its implications on representation. We have sent correspondence to the British Amateur Boxing Association in relation to the impact on the Good Friday Agreement and to open discussion around representation. We are conscious that any changes to the current pathway would require support from our world body, IABA. We are aware that Sport and I are engaging with other Sports Council on the issue of representation, and we await their recommendations. Safeguarding. We have reviewed and updated the Ulster Safeguarding in Boxing policy. Update included equality statement and policy, anti-discrimination statement and social media. Child Protection in Sport Unit, NSPCC, has noted that our progress in the framework for safeguarding and protecting children in and through sport in Northern Ireland. Next page. Branding. The IABA recently recruited a commercial and marketing manager and is in the process of developing marketing strategy. This will lead to modernisation of the brand and branding and in line with the requirements of our world body. Through this progress report, I hope our commitment to the recommendations is clear and progress is noted by the committee to ensure its ongoing support. This concludes our progress report, and my colleagues and I are now happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Just a couple of points there, and I'll work backwards. Since the last one there in front of me. What exactly does it mean when it says modernised branding to incorporate all of the boxers that they represent? Is there something about the current branding, whatever that, I'm not clear on what that is, that isn't in some way inclusive? What was that getting at?
Within the report from the independent working group, it focused on the branding of the, mainly as it's in and around the letter heading and certificates that may be given out to national champions.
Right.
Yeah, as pointed out, we are working. We now have recruited and appointed a commercial and marketing manager, and we're in the process of changing our name as well because of the rules laid down by our world body. We have to drop the word amateur from our name, but that will lead to obviously a rebranding, and within that rebranding we will also be looking at everything involved.
Okay, and just one other point then. On page, well, we won't have page numbers, but in the report that was produced, reference to the introduction of a formal selection process for Ulster coaches who wish to bring young boxers to the Commonwealth Games. Was there no selection process up to now, or no formal one? That's the implication there. Or how were they selected? Or
yeah, it's slightly misleading. There is a process to go through, and it's a democratic process, and coaches will be elected via their clubs. They are affiliated, and that's run through the Ulster Boxing Council. There was no process.
Right.
There currently is a process,
right,
and it's led through the clubs where coaches are nominated and voted on at an Ulster Boxing Council level.
And if coaches are going to the Commonwealth Games, and boxers, maybe you can clarify this for me, if boxers are going to the Commonwealth Games representing Northern Ireland, are they all from Northern Ireland, or are there some from Donegal, Cavan and Monaghan, or are they all from Northern Ireland?
They would be from Northern Ireland.
Okay, and are all the coaches from Northern Ireland?
Not necessarily. each cycle is different. So the coaches are voted on the 4-year period, just in advance of the major championship. For example, the last time round it was John Conlon who resides in Belfast, but originally is from Dublin, but has lived here for 30 years. Alongside
30 years, you're only a blow-in, you see.
yeah, alongside Stephen Friel, who is originally from Donegal, I think.
Right, okay. Right, first one, William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Cruz, for your attendance here today, gentlemen. In terms of disciplinary procedures that you have here, just going through your presentation, you did a review of those and you've updated procedures. Is that because you identified gaps in that? Did you in terms of the review? Did the review necessitate changes to be made? Is what I'm asking you.
Well, we're an evolving organisation. The organisation is 104 years old, and as such, we're continuously looking to improve and continuously trying to better any procedures that are in place. We're also dictated by our world governing body in terms of rulings that would be handed down for various items to do with boxing. So it's a continuous process of updating our procedures and policies.
Are these changes universal changes that your world body has dictated to you, or were there specifics for Northern Ireland that you had to make alterations?
I would say that any changes that have to come through be universal, in fitting with the world body standards laid down, and also incorporating all 4 provinces, all clubs within the organisation.
Can I ask then, in terms of the work that you've carried out in practice, on the ground, are these policies making a difference? Is it early to get or say?
Meaning a difference to
how your association is being run, how the affiliated clubs are working alongside you, how they're working inside the clubs. The changes that you're making, is there evidence that those changes having been made are making a difference for the good?
I suppose I had to take this in a broad context, and the changes that are being made at IAB is structural. It's from the very top down. So, in terms of our board of directors have recently changed. We've recruited some very top, very eminent professionals into the organisation. We've changed our memos and articles. It's currently in with revenue at the moment, and we'll move in then into the company's registration office. And with that in mind, we would also be changing the constitution of the board of directors, meaning that they will be made up of one person from each of the provinces. So that will be done mainly in order to one, for the dissemination of information from the board to the provinces directly from their representative at board level, but also to cascade down corporate governance reviews into the provinces and eventually down also into the clubs. So that's a long way to say yes.
Yeah, well, it's to the clubs then I want to turn in relation to boxing clubs, and we all have boxing clubs in our constituencies. There is a huge lack of capacity because in some clubs, because I was talking to Tom Dunn last night, who did a huge amount of work to working with young fellas like Tommy Waite and Kern Lodge in the Shankill, and those guys can be tied up 5-6 nights a week, Saturdays if they're going to Dublin or whatever. And they really are chasing their tails in terms of trying to, and we've been working with them to try and get them some funding, but capacity for me is an issue, because these guys love the sport, and they're about developing the young boxers, and there he's working with over around 100 kids and has a waiting list, you know. But the point that I wanted me to make was I've managed to get him new premises in the sense that he's now in an old school, and he's in better conditions than he was, and the kids are, but they're not by any means great, but they're better than we were. In terms of the boxing clubs that you have across Northern Ireland, does the association, or has the association, carried out a piece of work which would actually basically be an inspection or a survey of the standard of the conditions in which clubs are operating? I make this point, Mr. Cruz, for this reason. The department has a boxing strategy, Belfast City Council has a boxing strategy, and when I was a member of Belfast City Council I kept stressing, and I have whenever officials have been in front of this committee as well, that there needs to be a joined upness there, that they cannot operate in isolation, certainly in this city. I mean, do you do a survey? Do you identify which clubs are the worst off and therefore need the most money to be spent in terms of capital investment because of the conditions in which the kids are working? Perfect example, in West Belfast, there, West Circular Road, is Albert Foundry, appalling condition, have been for years. Is that done?
Yeah. Well, Stephen will take this up because he's directly responsible for that. So.
I think it's important to bear in mind that it's only really been 2 years where there's been investment into the staffing of people within Ulster Boxing. In a previous life, at first 18 months with the IABA, my role was club development and supporting the clubs, so the clubs that you alluded to I know very well. In terms of nearly auditing and in terms of the standards of both facilities and the capacity of the individuals, yes, we have gone through that process, and that was in partnership with Sport NI in terms of making the application for the capital funding, where the IAB, in support with Sport NI, made the decision to get an independent company to go out and do a facilities audit, looking at the health and safety risks within clubs, and that was a large part of how the funding was designed. In terms of the capacity of club members, I think boxing's not on their own. I think as a general point in sport where very often it's 1 or 2 people running clubs and it's very difficult. Again, as the club development manager within Ulster, at the very early stages of my time was to go in and try and get a snapshot of where we were with that, and the support was offered through development of policies and procedures that they could very quickly implement within their clubs. The next step on to that is around the Club Mark scheme, which has now been launched specifically for boxing clubs, and the information I gave you there, which really does categorise the elements that we're looking for our clubs to improve in, and so we can direct support on that, and that could be club management, so how they actually just manage the day-to-day.
But sorry to interrupt you, Stephen, but you know, those clubs I mentioned at various stages have Club Mark, but they're still operating in very poor conditions.
Yes, and the both clubs that you mentioned are in line to receive funding, and I know I've been working very closely with Albert Foundry in particular, because they're looking at, and apologies, chronology the same, where it could be a cocktail of funders, so I've been helping them with the DSD and things like that.
So just I'll finish at this point, Chairman, because I think it's hugely important. So after that piece of work is done that you're talking about, and I know you're only 2 years into, but after that piece of work is done, there is a list then of clubs. You have a survey, you know where they are in terms of the facilities or the lack of facilities that they have at their disposal. I mean, it's amazing that a world champion in the name of Wayne McCulloch came out of Albert Foundry given the facilities.
Changed.
To be honest, just go to water, you know. But nevertheless, it showed his commitment and Joe Robinson's commitment to make sure it happened. But in terms of those clubs, that list there, you then as an association will come behind those clubs and help those clubs, whether it's through Belfast City Council in this city's context, or the department or whatever. Do you prioritise, or is it a free-for-all, the clubs just go themselves?
Prioritise in terms of working with the clubs.
In terms of going to get funding to help the clubs.
I think the reality is that through certainly the Sport Eye Capital Grant, there were about 80 applications, and with £3.2 million, that really resulted in about 40 of those getting. So there's still a massive void there. So there's more work to do.
Only point I'm making is if a club has a lot more coaches and lay people supporting it, and they then have this skill set to go and fill in applications, they are well placed to continue to get funding. If other clubs have only got 1 or 2 coaches and don't have that capacity or the skill set to do that, they need the support very much of the governing body to help them do it. Only by doing that will a level playing field be created. That's the point of me.
I suppose if I could come in there, when it's, I have very close links with both clubs that you just mentioned, and a very prestigious history between the two of them in boxing. That's really why we were so delighted to be able to put a club development officer in place for these clubs also, because their position is to go in and help the clubs and allow the coaches to be coaches and help those clubs to fill out the required forms where necessary and help them to put processes in place to allow them to draw down funds from various areas.
And if I could just follow up on that, another important development for ourselves was that in January we were afforded the opportunity to employ another member of staff to focus in on club development. So all of a sudden, 2 years down the line where we started from scratch, we now have an Ulster club development officer, but then we've also somebody who can focus more in the northwest area as well, just to add further support.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
How is the person up in the northwest funded?
Through Sport and Eye, through their Active Clubs programme, which opened for bidding around last summer. We're open to all sports, and we were one of the ones fortunate enough to demonstrate the need for that support.
So the other person that was covering all of Northern Ireland would now be covering...
We've just kind of split it up.
Except the northwest, yeah, okay. Right, thank you. Karen McKevitt?
Yeah, thanks very much. Can I ask, the post that was created there in January, how long is that for?
Subject to funding, the initial commitment is for 1 year, but the overall aim is for 4 years.
Right, okay, thanks for your presentation this morning. I suppose the weeks that's in it, when the world has been watching the boxing here in this region, and to see champions coming out of it, it's amazing. I just want to know, how are you going to I suppose gain an advantage into of having world-class boxers here in the region? How do you intend to expand that to help promote boxing?
Yeah, the investment into boxing in Ulster over the last few years has really allowed us to branch out in those areas, but it's really standing on the shoulders of the volunteers that had already been in place down through the years. You know, boxing has such a proud history in Ireland, but particularly particularly in Ulster as well. And it's down to, as William pointed out, it's down to the likes of those coaches who are in the club, 5 nights a week, sometimes 6 or 7, and doing it on a volunteer basis and coming in to help young children from very underprivileged backgrounds. And it's also the referees and judges that give up their time free of charge, and the administrators who do that. So standing on the shoulders of them now, the paid workforce have a job at hand to ensure that because they have 40 hours a week plus to give over directly to boxing, that they bring it to the next level. And we've been very lucky to be able to hire a high performance coach for Ulster, who will deal specifically with the boxers, the high performance and young aspiring boxers within the province.
And I know that in boxing, and it tends to be, when there's volunteers involved in any sports, it seems to be the same families that continue the tradition down through the years. So maybe their grandfather was a volunteer, and a coach of some kind, and then it goes down, and the same families seem to be able to box. But since you've created the volunteer policy and making it an essential tool within your clubs, how do you intend to monitor that and to make sure that within that you have your child protection courses on time and they're not running out? And is there a plan of action for that?
Yeah, again, that comes down, you know, we have to be cognizant of the fact that the down through the ages and even still to this date, you know, the IABA is predominantly fueled and ran by volunteers, and we have a very small paid staff in place. So we do still rely on volunteers to carry out this work, but they do so with vigour and zest and to a very professional level. But also into that we have built and designed procedures for the paid staff to ensure that this is monitored and checked.
Thank you. Just
want to carry on?
Yeah.
Well, maybe just to go a little bit further in terms of the examples, the Club Mark scheme will be the ideal opportunity for us to be able to monitor how clubs are going and what they may be lacking on. And that was probably from me as a paid employee. But again, just to touch on the volunteers, through the county boards and the Ulster Provincial Board, they're very good at keeping an eye on where we are. Just very recently, Ulster Boxing Council have been running courses for our referees and judges, just to top them up to ensure that they're always ahead of the game. So it's twofold. There's a lot of the stuff that's going on with the volunteers as well.
and just suppose with the independent working group and the recommendations that's coming from them, how do you see that affecting your budget? Are you getting an extra budget to be able to deliver on some of their recommendations?
That's primarily the role of the operations manager, and I believe the funding for that operations manager through Sport NI was directly to deal with the recommendations and to help us to put in better corporate governance within.
Okay, is that a year's post, or is that 4 years, the same as the one that was created?
It currently runs up to 2017 and then will be reviewed.
That's great, thanks very much, thank you.
Thank you. Rosie McCordy.
Gurmaya Caherly. And Gurmaya and Carl Lara, thank you very much for the presentation and for coming here today. Are you content with the recommendations of the independent working group, that they're being progressed?
Yeah, I think, yes, in general we are. I think it needs to be recognised some of this will take a little bit of time. There's some easy wins, and I think the progress report maybe alluded to some of the stuff that we have been able to proceed with. Bearing in mind, as operations manager, I was really only in for 5 months. We do understand that the report has been out a little bit longer, but there were reasons for it to take that length of time in terms of a bit of further consultation with clubs, with Sport NI, and trying to get some money from Sport NI to allow us to help us to deliver on some of it. So really, from coming in October time, that's really the starting point for me to be able to get my teeth stuck into some of the points, and I think we're progressing, and we'll continue. There's a certain commitment to do that.
In terms of the recommendation to look at Good Friday Agreement implications, would you see that as divisive in the sport if some boxers were to choose to go with the British identity as opposed to the Irish identity? Or would you? How do you view that?
I suppose historically, people are in boxing for boxing purposes, and that has been shown on throughout our history in boxing. That people like Sean Canavan here ensured that boxing carried on, and it was the one sport that everybody looked to throughout the hardest points in the conflict. That the likes of our boxers from all communities came together for the love of the sport, and we want to encourage that and continue that and build on that. So what we would, if any boxer wanted to box for GB, we would certainly, in consultation and with Sport NI, make them aware of the pathways. I suppose for ourselves, we would be happy to consult the ABA and the World Body. We'd be certainly willing to consult with them and to and to where appropriate. And but really, what we must stress is that we do agree with the recommendations of the independent working group that Northern Ireland Boxing Association would be divisive for our sport.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, and I mean, boxing here has been hugely successful, particularly recently, and congratulations to everybody involved for that. It's actually great to see. But if it were to go that way, would it be an either or could someone choose to play for Ireland, or box for Ireland and box for Britain? I mean, or would it be like a line in the sand if somebody was to choose that, or maybe you're not even at that point?
It would certainly be a matter for the world body to be able to, as it currently stands, from a country. If you have boxed for a country, there's a step out period before you can box for another country, and that would be on application to the world body.
Okay, just one last question. Just see in terms of the old state of premises and the facilities and all of that, and it's been raised here. I've visited a couple of facilities in my own constituency, and I actually was down with Sean, and the conditions were abysmal, and the other one wasn't much better. But I have to say the passion and enthusiasm from the young people there was just unbelievable. So, I mean, I think it's to be commended that people do participate in this sport without, very much in way of good facilities, but they still achieve excellence, and everybody in that, the trainers and all of the coaches and volunteers are to be commended. But is that across the board, or would you see our standards rising, and like when would you see things getting to an acceptable level?
Again, it's very much progress. I think we're fortunate now that we're pretty much at a stage where we're press and go on quite a number of the capital developments. There are 3 or 4 clubs who are probably slightly ahead, and there's work currently being done in facilities, but that's because there was match funding that was year-end sensitive. And I understand that Sport and I were up a couple of weeks ago with you to give you an update. But on a whole, out of the 40-odd clubs who are being funded, the majority of them are about to get their contractors in place over the next month or 6 weeks or so.
Okay, that's good. And one last question. Would you see Northern Katie Taylor emerging?
Katie Taylor is certainly one of a kind. They don't come around too often. She's 5 times world champion now. She's Olympic champion. She's surpassed any records that were out there previous to her. So she's certainly one of a kind. But there's certainly some good boxers coming up around the country that are going to try their best to emulate her.
Do you feel you encourage women enough?
I think there's been a marked improvement and an increase in female participation, and even going back to the Commonwealth Games, where we were fortunate enough for two of the females come back with medals.
Right. There's a word called pre-penultimate, and it means you get 3 more questions, but you've used up all 3.
That was the last question.
Gordon Dunn.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, gentlemen, for your presentation. When was this report actually issued? When was the report?
Yeah, that's what
It is dated here December 23rd. Is that when it was initiated, or is that when it was actually finalised?
It was published in December 2013.
2013. So it's a year and a half old, roughly. Getting there. Yeah. It hasn't been before this committee before. The report hasn't been brought to this committee before.
Yeah, it was apparently before my time.
Was it? Yeah.
February.
Right. Okay. Before our time. In relation to the Sandy Road Club, and we're all aware of the issues there, has the recommendations that are here, and we see them in front of us, are 12. Do you feel that they have gone any way in trying to address the issues that have been raised through the Sandy Road Club and have been highlighted in the media recently? In fact, very recently.
Have the recommendations gone in any way to
address those issues?
Yes, I think the recommendations do address those issues.
In what way?
I believe the recommendations are in order to to put in robust disciplinary procedures where required, and it certainly for the association to focus on sectarianism or racism where it may occur, that we would deal more swiftly with matters such as what happened in Sandy Row.
Okay, you feel that it's gone some way. Did you engage with the club during this report?
Yeah, each club were invited along to discuss and input into the report, and as far as I'm aware, somebody took up that opportunity.
Yeah, I see some evidence here that later on that certainly there were representatives from the club and representing their different views, obviously, towards the input on the report. It talks here about intimidation and recommendation to intimidation and chill factors should be eliminated where possible. What do you mean by where possible? Would that be a way that we would
be reading from the report?
Yeah. Page 90 that we have numbered here in the recommendations. It talks about intimidation and chill factors should be eliminated where possible. Why where possible?
We didn't write the report.
I understand that, but it's obviously relating to boxing and the changes that are being brought about in relation to it.
I think that if any issues are evident, then we would have to deal with it. It's a general point, I think. It's not. Some we'll deal with, some we won't. I think all of them we would tackle.
But you are committed, obviously, to dealing with such issues as intimidation and chill factors. There's a clear commitment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Excuse me, if I may.
Certainly.
Mr. Morrow chaired the last chill factor meeting, and I asked him if he would, for our benefit, isolate where the chill factors were occurring in order to address them. He said he would tell me. It must be a secret because he's never told me yet. But I'd like to go one place, and Miss McCorley said she was in my club, and it's not a great deal different from Albert Foundry. 60 years old. I've been hoping and praying that the graffiti artists up and down the road would come and do the front of the club to make it look a bit brighter. But I personally would prefer. You shook your head, Mr. McCausland, when you heard the word amateur had been withdrawn. Our world body, people at the very top, they're absolutely and totally ruthless. They don't stand people down. They stand countries down. So these are the things, you know, Ireland is a very small island, and we are punching way, way above our weight. And that, if you guide by Olympic levels, we're somewhere in the region of 5th to 8th in the world of boxing. I prefer to say amateur boxing, but however. But that's where we stand. North and West Belfast has 9 Olympic medals. It's incredible. Coming from those clubs, such as Wayne McCullough, such as Jim McCourt, and all the other ones that come in. And the word that's been used here, possibly 3 times, is the biggest word of the whole lot: volunteers. This is all voluntary. The raising of funds to take our boxers, no matter where, voluntary. And as regards, I believe in total inclusivity. I believe that when we do start off, if a young boy wants to box for a British title through the CYP, Clubs for Young People, not a problem. If he wants to box on a very successful Commonwealth Games team, it's not a problem. There aren't any problems there. Now, I would not be so much worried about the men who are picked as coaches to these teams, because that is done in a fair and open manner. I would rather focus on the success of that team and the previous one, because it bears testament to the work that is being carried out. And that's not just, that's at the top of it. I boxed for a long time myself, and when I reached the heights of mediocrity at the age of 26, but however, most kids that go into clubs, they go in to enjoy it. Don't go in to ask me, Mister, can I box for so-and-so or so-and-so? Can I box for Elan or Athlone? Come in to box for the club. Come in to enjoy themselves. And you hope there'll be success. I had a great success with one man. Came from Larne, but he boxed for me and he boxed for our club. And he's still the most successful boxer in this country, pro boxer in this country. But in all, as I say, I think it should be recognised more than anything, the voluntary work that goes into the workings of all these clubs. And some clubs that may have a wee bit more success than others, Mr. Humphreys, some guys are better at filling in forms than that. Now, in all fairness to Stephen here, Stephen was in a position to help people fill forms in. And it is one of the best assets we had in a long, long time. But it's a question of catch-up for the Harry Robbins of this world and the Sean Canavans of this world. We lag behind a bit. But hopefully somebody will recognise what you did say and bring us all level. We'd all like to have first-class facilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Oliver McMullen.
I just, sorry I didn't get your whole presentation. I had to go out there. But congratulate you on your presentation and congratulate you on how you're taking this inquiry forward in a very open manner. I think it will pay dividends in the long run, But can I just say something to you that with the new councils merging together, every council's doing their community plan, and I think you should feed into that community plan because that's going to help boxing in each council area. What's in the community plan is going to be the blueprint for councils to take forward, and I think you need to be contacting all the councils now to feed into there now. From the 1st of April we'll be doing their community plans. Feed into them there, because you want to keep boxing top of the sports, or one of the top in each council area. Belfast Council will be staying the same, but outside it's breaking down into 11 councils instead of the figures before. So feed into that there, vitally important for you.
Yep, I think just on that point, if I can, certainly whenever I started 2 years ago, it was very evident that the boxing clubs were kind of working in isolation, and they hadn't the experience in forming partnerships with councils and with funders and stuff like that. And one of the early things that I did was make sure that councils knew who the clubs were in their areas and form that relationship with their sports development officers to help out. And I think there's been an improvement. I think Belfast City Council were probably the most engaged at the early stage, but I think now that all the councils are fully aware of what's going on.
The other thing, the rural development programme starting up probably in the middle of the year. Funding in there as well, for budget. Few things there just to keep your eye on them, but well done, keep the good work going, keep the medals coming in.
Good, thank you. Oliver, Basil.
Thank you, Chair. I won't take too long. I just say because I missed your presentation actually. So, but I've listened to the comments that have been around the table, and I'd just like to pass on to you. I'm impressed by the way that you've handled things, the way you've approached the whole issue. I think it's a good one. And whatever we can do in terms of being supportive, we'd like to do that. Sometimes people are asking questions. You sort of think, are they having a go? I don't think that is the case. Actually, I think it's very positive. It's very good. Thank you, Sean, for your speech. I was worried there that Fergal wasn't going to let you speak in the whole thing.
I thought it wasn't either. I thought I was here just to make it all look good.
He's the face of boxing.
So, yes, we'll not go down that route, but there are some issues, obviously, that have to be addressed. You've handled them discreetly and with form. I think that's the right way forward. So it's not that we can duck issues. There are certain things that I think but I'll just finish by saying I think you did a good job today, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Could I just ask, when do you hope there's someone in place of Stephen Mark II or whatever?
As soon as possible is
definitely Mark II.
is the goal. I don't know whether we'll get somebody as good as Stephen, but that'll be the goal, and it'll be put somebody in his place as soon as possible.
Yeah, we are out to advertisement for the post, so that closes next week. So in the next week or two.
And the report that was done, the audit of facilities across Northern Ireland, is that the property of the IABA or Sport NI?
IABA and the individual clubs. Through that process, about 80 clubs came forward with the other.
Is there a final document that sort of summarises it, that they need?
We need another
150k.
We need another 12 million if you can.
That's what I mean. Yes.
Yeah,
is there something that has that all set down that is available or accessible?
Yes.
A good rule of thumb, I think, is something that Stephen has pointed out already, is that 40 clubs have been successful in it. There's as many clubs again that could benefit from further investment into the facilities that they're currently operating out of. So it would be extremely beneficial that this scheme would be carried on further.
Okay. There's clearly a huge variation in the quality of facilities. I went to a club up in West Belfast, I think it was Glean, or I'm not sure.
Glean, I might be there, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. That's it. Wasn't sure of the pronunciation. And they were in a unit in a business park, and that seemed to work well for them. There was another new one up around Blacks Road, with Apex Housing did it.
Yeah, that's
whatever it was called, I can't remember.
Is that Emerald?
Yeah, it's Emerald Quarries.
Yeah.
Somewhere about Suffolk.
Yeah, that's right, Emerald. Yeah.
And somewhat in Ballymena as well, one of them. And then you go to other ones, and I'm not familiar with your own club, the conditions there, but as William was identifying, having up a few times to see Albert Foundry, 'cause that seemed to be one of the worst.
Sorry, you're more than welcome to come to our club any time, Mr. McCausland.
Yeah, no, it's been my life, got right all the. Yeah, I'll maybe take you up on that. Yeah, sure. That's not.
You get him in the ring?
I'm too old.
He was in the ring with them. We had boxing gloves home, but there was no violence. All right, it was only for photographs. Pacifist. In terms of, is there? I'm just asking about the document. Is for reasons that are there reasons why we shouldn't look at it, or would it be helpful for us to get a better picture of it?
No, there's no reasons why we shouldn't. I think we probably should have a look at it, because unfortunately the 40 clubs who missed out through the process, they need major investment.
Yes, the 40 clubs, that's sort of modest investment, if I'm right in saying. If you were going for, look, when this needs knocked down from the ground up, that wasn't the sort of thing that was doing.
There are a number of larger projects, and they're the ones who probably required additional match funding.
Okay.
So I think the biggest investment is probably about 400,000, but through the Sport and I funding, they capped it at 200,000, so we needed to support clubs getting match funding.
Thank you, Stephen. No other questions then?
There's a grant there. The department, Michelle O'Neill, is bringing out a grant for clubs up to £1,500, and it'll be out by the middle of the year, in the summertime.
Right. Okay.
Be something for the clubs up here to look at for applying to, for improving facilities.
Is it just rural?
Obviously for rural clubs then. Yeah.
Give me a shout and I'll give you
rural proof. I don't think North and West Belfast quite fit into that category, so maybe.
Oh, well, there's a West Belfast Farmers Co-op, you know.
Okay, on the basis of what Oliver McMullen has said, all the clubs in North West Belfast will now be applying to make sure that we get money out of this.
And you go along with
Dard.
the Farmers Co-op,
Okay.
West Belfast.
And if anybody queries it, it's because he said it. Thanks very much indeed for your presentation. And you can see people are interested in the subject of boxing, and we value it as a sport. Like, even if you're not passionate fan of boxing. Anybody, and it's something I would watch when it's on TV. But having said that, I think everybody recognises that the dedication and the qualities that it helps to instill in young people, in terms of personal skills, discipline, and all of that. When you go into any of the amateur clubs and see that, really is impressive. It's good for the young people. So, thank you indeed for your contribution, and we'll have a discussion now about what to do next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh, for goodness sake, I've been here all day. Rosie ripped the back out of it. Right. Now, we've had the presentation there. Are there any particular proposals anyone wants to make in regard to that presentation? Boxing comes up later on under correspondence as well, by the way. Okay.
The only thing I would say, Chair, and there's clearly progress being made as Basil has identified, but I'm still not convinced that if you have a boxing club there with one or two guys that are running the club who don't have the skill set, and I think Stephen was more or less saying,
yes,
there are clubs with people who, and that will be the same across all sports, indeed across life, but I just don't like the idea that there are clubs there, and Mr. Canavan suggesting his club might be in the same boat as Albert Foundry, that if those skills aren't there, then I think it's a responsibility of the association, which is to make sure that they then step in to ensure that
if you're the vice president of the IABA and you've got a problem in your club, Jimmy, somewhere far removed from the upper echelons, isn't probably going to have much chance. So there is an issue there, certainly, absolutely. Could I park that until we come to the correspondence? There's a suggestion there maybe that could arise out of that. Okay, you're happy enough. The matters arising then. Correspondence tracker, page 116. And you can see there all the various items.
Noted. Agreed.
Still waiting in reply.
Time for lunch, Gordon.
Bit of work to do.
Yes, well, war of attrition, I'll wear you down on it. Under arts and culture strategy, what was the question? Oh yeah, we had written to them about the membership. Presumably that's what that's about. Brings me on then to.
Churches are still working on.
Oh, they are in this. Okay, right. Brings me on then to. Page 117, we're not getting into discussion to it today, but simply to say DCAL officials will brief the committee on the outcome of the consultation on the proposals for an Irish language bill, and that will be done in June 2015. The Minister has welcomed the role of the committee as a super consultee as part of this consultation process. The committee has asked the Minister for a timeline of the development of the bill, detailing dates when a summary of the responses will be available, when drafting of the bill will be complete, and when the bill will be introduced to the Assembly. The Minister was unable to provide specific answers to these questions, but stated that the bill will be progressed in accordance with the legislative process. That's a surprise. Are members content? Some of you noted at this stage.
Noted.
Okay.
All of it.
I think his stomach was for rumbling. Can I refer members to correspondence at page 121 from the Minister regarding support for Northern Ireland Publications Resource. The committee had asked the Minister to support NIPR and its initiative and so on, and said that while she cannot guarantee funding will be protected, she will consider the request as part of the DCAL budget consultation process.
Right.
Now, it brings me then to page 127, and this is where I was going to make a suggestion. We've got their correspondence back from the department there and from the Minister regarding the number of things, but one of them there is boxing strategy and future funding. If you look at the bottom of that page, I can advise that my department's current internal 4-year capital plan does include a bid proposal for additional capital funding for boxing. However, this has not yet been officially placed with DFP. There is also the potential for boxing to benefit from the new £17.5 million lottery sports facility investment, and it aims to provide integrated sports facilities that meet the need of community participants and high performance. I thought they already had a high performance thing down at Jordanstown. That's what he said. Are they intending to move that somewhere else? Is it staying there? There's not much clarity about that. There's also reference there to Sport NIB in discussions with Metropolitan College, White Rock campus in regard to Corpus Christi, in reference to Hillview and Ballygolan and Ardoyne and Holy Cross, aimed at securing suitable accommodation for them as possibly as part of the St Gemma's site. But it does strike me that in regard to all of this, there does seem to be rather a lot of what I will describe as ad hocery. Would there be merit in asking, because later on you'll see we're losing our current acting permanent secretary, who's moving back to being the deputy, and Dennis McMahon's coming across from OFM DFM to be the new acting permanent secretary.
Talking about ad hocery.
Yes, as the music stops, you know what seat they're in. So would there be merit, she finishes at the end of the month, is there merit in asking her, she will have done the work, or been in charge rather when it was all happening, and Dennis coming in to try and get to the bottom of how this ad hocery operates. Particularly there in regard to the boxing, it seems almost as if, and some of the things, almost as if you or circumvent Sport NI by going straight to the department, you can access money. But how does everybody know to do that? It does seem rather odd that there's no clarity about it. Is there merit in us trying to get a briefing from officials about how this is handled? Are members content to do that?
Great.
Well, I knew you'd agree. If I said we'd all throw in £100, you'd...
There's no chance you use him.
I think the permanent secretary and the deputies, so we get to the... Yeah.
That may not be...
No, it'll be immediately after the recess. Okay. Brings me on then to right, page 127. I've picked out there already some of the issues that are in that, and we'll invite them along. Okay, note that. Then there are page 3 of tabled papers. Thank you. Decal arm's length body reviews and PEDU. Thank you for your letter. So on. The team within Decal that took forward the review had access to in-house economists and specialists to quality assure the project. Therefore, there was no requirement to commission PEDU. Content to note that. Brilliant. Then, page 5. Yes, this is the letter back in regard to Ardoyne Youth Club, and this is this ties into what I was saying about the earlier letter. You look at paragraph 3. Ardoyne Youth Club approached the department in October 2013 for help to improve its sports and gym equipment. While the department through Sport NI confirmed the need to take forward the work could not proceed that time. To date, no funding has been provided to the scheme. However, the department remains committed to seeking to secure the funds and to honour the commitment made to provide assistance to the club. So a commitment has been made outside of a funding round. This is where it all becomes bizarre. So we'll get them along anyway in due course.
Is that page 5 we're on?
Yep.
Yeah. It's just the last bit. Does anybody else seem that it's strange for page 6 rather than maybe £4,000 for portable goalposts?
Yeah.
I mean, just like, wait, what are these goalposts made out of?
It's a shipping cost, I think.
Like,
Have to be steel because
Portable
Just
goalposts.
go, I mean, I just can't turn the page, to be honest. I would force it for portable goalposts.
I was doing a portable goalpost yesterday in Shimnock School.
Well, okay, anyway, I'm just,
I think they're stainless steel because it
That's
corrode
right.
with the salt water if there anything else.
it could be, Oliver, I thought, like, I bought portable goalposts once and I got the cheap ones at 250 quid. But obviously there's different, anyway, I'm not making a point, let's
Thank you.
with Gordon with this.
Then moving on rapidly.
I see Carrick Rangers get money there too.
Yes, that was the other one I noticed.
We'll move on quickly past Carrick Rangers
67,000.
because he's not here today.
You know.
Mr. Carrick Rangers.
Temporary thing.
Is we
Temporary
open?
changing facilities.
Is we open?
Mr. Woodville's here, but
There.
Referring the members to page
Sorry,
9.
it says temporary changing facilities, £67,000. A lot of money for temporary, no matter whether Mr. Carrick Rangers are here or not. Like.
Well, when he's here, you can ask him. I assume this is for some sort of porta cabin. It may not be that it's there for a short term, it might be there for 20 odd years, but it's still a porta
I
cabin.
don't know the circumstances behind the question that Mr. Kevin has raised, but I do know that get a porta cabin with facilities to be required for change rooms, you'd be talking about close to £100,000.
Well, if it's the porta cabin, that's all right.
I suspect that.
Why didn't they say it? Porta cabin that's going to be there for 20 years instead of making it out for. That's only a temporary thing, too.
Yes.
It's not temporary if it's 20 years. That's 20 years.
Okay. Pardon me. That's page 9 then is, there's an awful lot of table papers. European related concerns. Following the City Council briefing on European engagement, the committee suggests DCAL approach City Council to discuss best practice. The ministers confirmed that our officials have met with Laura Leonard at Belfast City Council on the 6th of March. Are you content to note? Pardon me.
Yeah.
Then page 1, correspondence. Page 132, we're back. Simply to main papers, right? That's this thing about retention and disposal schedule for employee records. It applies across all departments, it's standard, and every committee's getting it, so are you content to note?
Kevin, just it talks there on the introduction. These periods will be amalgamated into department schedule and so on. This usually takes place every 2 or 3 years. Should that be not more specific than just every 2 or 3 years? Usually takes place every 2 or 3 years.
I think it may be that some years it's 4 years or...
It's not the way to manage documents, though.
Apparently, well, I went through this yesterday, listening to it all in the Education Committee, but it applies to all the committees. It's a standard thing across civil service. It's just mountains and mountains of paperwork. Why they're keeping some things till you're 100, goodness knows.
Well,
I don't think we're going to change that. We've noted that.
not interested. Go on.
Good. Could you look at the correspondence then from the clerk to the Committee for Finance and Personnel regarding the Civil Service Voluntary Exit Scheme, for which there may not be any money if we're
Noted.
going the way we're going as of Monday. Then also the department, the move of Dennis McMahon across to become the Acting Permanent Secretary. Content to note that, page 147. Page 12 of the table papers was correspondence from the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland regarding the DCAL Cultural Awareness Strategy. The strategy is designed for the distribution of cultural awareness funding in the context of a shared and better future. Now, there were 2 streams from this. One was the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland, the other was to the GAA. The letter from Grand Orange Lodge referred to the positive and constructive programmes delivered by them, and it was significant the number of maintained schools who had availed of that. They're also aware that, they say there, the GAA had received funding for the strategy, and some of the work that they did was together, the 2 bodies jointly. Due to current financial constraints, this funding is ceasing, and the Grand Orange Lodge is asked to meet with the committee to discuss its work. Could I do 2 things there, I suppose? Suggest that would members be agreeable to schedule a briefing from the department regarding the strategy and the distribution of funding. Now, the issue there is for both the GAA and Galway, it ends at the end of this month. So it might be useful if we got them along before ASAP to hear. Okay, thank you.
Because to be fair to both organisations, if they're getting a letter that's dated the 6th of March from the department telling them that basically the funding's running out and it's going to run at the end of the month.
Well, the other thing I think
financial year. Why do you put people on protected notice if you're getting a letter on the 6th of March?
Yeah.
Some difficulty.
But in the context of TBUC and building a united community, it was one of those.
I think it was more kind of programmes and strategies rather than post creation for that project, if my recollection.
No, they're posts.
No, they're posts for delivery. There's people employed in both organisations.
Right, okay.
It's like 1.5 people in each. Then, Chairperson's Business, page 148. You're welcome to attend the Temple event in Londonderry on the Saturday, the 21st of March. It is a bonfire on a giant scale.
Bonfires, no.
It is a bonfire. You're burning wood. That's what a bonfire is. Giant bonfire, but an artistic bonfire.
Noted.
What does that mean? They're painting?
Burning artists.
That's the stuff that we saw at Northwest. Beautiful
The thing, yes. Then the next one is page 149.
Yeah.
Or in London, you know.
Page 149, inviting members to attend Generation Innovations Night of Ambition, St George's Market, on Wednesday of next week at 5 p.m. And then also Evolve, Thursday the 2nd of April at the Mac Theatre on the 2nd of April. If you want more details, let the committee, or you want to go ask the committee team about it. Forward work programme is page 152. Clark, please.
A briefing is going to be provided by the British Board of Film Classification on the 19th of March, followed by a lunch. If members could indicate to the committee support team whether they would like to attend the lunch, so that we can confirm the places.
They're doing some work on moving away from just doing films and DVDs or whatever, to doing work around all of the sort of pop video stuff or whatever. I'm not very au fait with all this.
Sorry, when is this? The 19th?
19th of
Next
March.
week.
At what time?
After the committee.
After the committee. But it's quite interesting how they're doing it, because these things are across transatlantic. You know, a lot of the stuff, and the differences also they're addressing between what's acceptable in UK and what's not acceptable, and what's acceptable or not in the USA, and they're not necessarily the same. Anyway, just to let you know. No other business has been highlighted to the committee office. If you have any other items, no. Thank you.
What about page 35 in the table papers?
35, missed that one. Oh yes, sorry, there was. Oh yes, sorry, that was mentioned earlier on. Then, okay, William, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you will have you see the letter there, Chair, that I got in response to a letter that I sent, which is in the over page to the enclosure in relation to the issue that I raised in the House on the 2nd of February with the Minister. A couple of issues that I want to put on the record. First of all, the figures that were quoted to this committee by Mr. Scott were of the Ulster Scots Agency, £625,000 for LIFA, and he also mentioned that there were 2 members of staff. Now you will see the question I asked, and you will see that the Minister suggests that I may not have got my facts right. Well, I've checked Hansard of this committee, and I entirely did get my facts right, as I knew I had.
So is that not Hansard of Assembly?
No, the Hansard of this I went back and checked, yes, and what was said at this committee.
Oh, right, by
Arthur Scott.
Oh, yes, by Arthur Scott, yes, okay.
I also then, the Minister suggests in her answer that in relation to Forest na Gaeilge, that Forest na Gaeilge may not have declined to take LIFA forward. I asked Mr McNally directly at this committee. He said that they had refused to do it because they hadn't got the resource. Again, I have that and have researched that. So I'm afraid at no point did I mislead the House. The information I used was the information that was given to this committee by Arthur Scott and Ferdy McNally. So I'm afraid the Minister is wrong there. The other thing, though, as well, is that the Minister suggested in her answer that she had tried to have several meetings with the Ulster Scots Agency around the issue. And, clearly you can see the response from Mr Crozier. You heard the evidence that he gave to this committee earlier. And in fact, the Minister, in her response, very clearly in the answer, made it clear, I understand that it's not going to come in the form of a language, but certainly a project in relation to Ulster Scots culture and heritage. I have asked for an equivalent, and I'm told that we'll support it financially. So the Minister is very clear that it's not about a language equivalent of LIFA or Ulster Scots. It's about resource and finance. So I'm simply making the point that you ask a question in the House based on facts that are presented to this committee by a senior civil servant out of DCAL, by the Chief Executive of Forest na Gaeilge, and the Minister says that I have got my facts wrong. Now, what do we do about that?
Well, first thing I suppose occurs to me here, this becomes like wrestling with jelly to some extent with this issue. There was a version of events given by Arthur Scott. There's a different version of events given by the Minister, and another version of events given by the Ulster Scots Agency. Now, would it be helpful on the day when we bring along the Permanent Secretary and the Deputy Permanent Secretary to run over and try and pin down, here's 3 versions, which one's the right one? Can we get it sorted out so we know where we stand?
Well, you see, I can tell you, Chair, that I have a letter from the Minister in response, and I'll finish with this because I know members are keen to get away. But there is a response from the Minister who said in the House that she had asked for meetings with the agency and had met them on a number of occasions, and they hadn't come forward with alternatives. She then says, there have been several occasions when I have attended either events or meetings where representatives of the wider Ulster Scots community have been present. That's not the same as Ulster Scots Agency being approached and not coming along to meetings, with respect. And that is the Minister's reply dated the 18th of February, which I received on the 20th of February.
And if you're dealing with something of the extent of hundreds of thousands of pounds, you don't do it on the basis of, well, I met a man in a corridor when we're coming out of something and I had a wee word in his ear. It would need to be formalised. If it's to get the same level of respect that is given where you're employing 2 staff to promote the other. I think the key thing is you've got the items of correspondence there, you've got the minutes, the Hansard and so on. We'll bring along the new Acting Permanent Secretary and the Deputy Permanent Secretary and run over these things. Maybe they need Mr Scott with them as well, because otherwise they could say something and we need to get to the bottom of it, maybe him as well. Yeah, that'll be fine.
Should we not be doing that before you bring them in? Or did you bring them in and then put that to them, they're going to go away to find out?
No, well, they'll know what they're coming about. Yes, it'll put to them. Oh, yes, it'll be put to them beforehand, so they know what they're coming about. Not a case of.
This is what you want clarity on?
Yes, yes, very much. Otherwise, it'll be a pointless exercise. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.